once.
Okay, good evening and welcome back to the Westborough Select Board meeting. We did call the meeting to order at 5:45 to enter into an executive session, which we did, and came out of that into this open session. So I will reconvene this meeting of the Westborough Select Board called here on Tuesday, January 10th. A couple things to note that we do have a quorum here with 3 members of the 5-person board in attendance. We do have Select Board member Patrick Welch attending remotely as allowed. Also to note that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded by Westborough TV, and wanted to make that note as is consistent with our practice. So with that, excuse me? Yep. With that, I will ask those that are able to stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, and first thing on our agenda is open forum. Is there anybody here for open forum? Okay, we're running a few minutes ahead here. I know we're probably waiting for others in terms of the swearing in. Actually, Chief Purcell, could I move up to item 7 on our agenda and have you handle that ahead of time? So this is a request to appoint Deputy Fire Chief Stephen Doucette to the as the Deputy Emergency Management Director and to the Local Emergency Planning Committee. So Chief Purcell.
Good evening, Board. Patrick Purcell, serving as your Fire Chief. Thank you for having us tonight. So in the correspondence that was put in your packet, I come before you with 2 requests. The first is to appoint Deputy Fire Chief Stephen Doucette as the Deputy Emergency Management Director for the town of Westborough, subject to your appointment, or previous to your appointment, or anticipated appointment tonight. You had Deputy Fire Chief Jason Fursky serving in that capacity until he resigned to become the chief in Natick. Since that time, there has been a vacancy in that position. It is an important position within not only our organization for the maintenance of policies and procedures and some of the assets that we have, but it's also an important position here in the town of Westborough. Should I not be available serving as your emergency management director, that there was a clearly defined number 2 that could work with the chair of the board should an emergency declaration need to be signed or issued or ordered. Some of the roles and responsibilities that are included in that position include the management of the Emergency Operations Center, the management and continued development of the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, to be a participant in the Local Emergency Planning Committee, which we're going to talk about next, the interagency training for hostile events within our own community, emergency management grant submission, procurement, and implementation, the creation of emergency action plans, managing emergency action plans for dams here within our own community, and also emergency planning for large-scale events, which we would bring all people in leadership positions here within our community together to develop thorough plans, like we did here for, say, the 300th anniversary for Westborough. So, subject to your approval, I can bring Deputy Doucette before you tonight if you'd like, and we would seek your permission to have him appointed into that position.
Okay. And do you want to do the LEPC one too at the same time? Or?
Sure. So the Local Emergency Planning Committee is a public and private group here in the community, as there is in every community. It stems from the Federal Right to Know Act, and was specifically, or at its origin, was specifically designed to let the public know about hazardous materials in their community. It's evolved into a few other things since then, but we have businesses that are part of the committee here in town, such as Whittier Rehab, Harvey Industries, Cumberland Farms, Maine's Foods, and as well as Public Works, Police, Fire, Planning, variety of other department heads. We are the primary recipient of Tier 2 submittals, which are given to us from places that have reportable quantities of hazardous materials here in Westborough. I can't think of a better candidate within our organization. Deputy Doucette is a hazmat tech, hazardous materials technician, which is the highest level of certification than one can have in the fire service. He's part of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts District 3 response team, and also does an exceptional job within our organization. So I would respectfully request appointment of the deputy to both of those positions tonight.
Okay, great. You want to
Sure.
bring him forward?
Deputy?
Welcome. And even got you to dress up for us this evening, right?
Oh, you have that, another
Yep.
special occasion.
So I would entertain a motion from the board, and then we open up for questions if there are.
Sure. I move to appoint Deputy Fire Chief Stephen
Nope.
Doucette to the Deputy Emergency Management Director position and as a member of the Local Emergency Planning Committee.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any comments or questions from the board?
No, thank you for being willing to take on this additional responsibility.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And
Yep.
I think it would be great, you don't always get to be in front of the public, at least not without a mask on, maybe. If you could just introduce yourself to the public, just tell folks a little bit about yourself,
Yep.
that'd be great.
Stephen Doucette, live in Hudson, Mass. My wife Stacy, been married for, get this right,
Uh-oh.
32 years. I have two children, my daughter Shelby, school teacher in Hudson, my son Greg, who's behind me, firefighter in Westborough Fire. Been on the fire department for 23 years. Before that, I was in private EMS. I'm very honored to be your deputy fire chief. Looking forward to serving the citizens of Westborough and the firefighters and the chief and the officers of Westborough Fire Department. Thank you.
Great. And thank you. We appreciate you being here, your service to the town, and now your service as
Thank you.
deputy chief. Well deserved. So we had a motion and a second to the chief's request. We need a roll call vote since we do have a member attending remotely. So Patrick? I heard you say Welch, yes. It was, you're on mute, but I saw your mouth move.
Sorry, Welch, yes.
Okay.
Edinburgh, yes.
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes.
It's 4-0 for being present. Congratulations on more responsibility.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks.
you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Chief Purcell, you tell us if folks are ready. We're a couple minutes early here, but 6:08.
So, in fairness, do you mind if we give it one more minute?
Yep, absolutely.
Do you want to do 11?
Sure. So item 11, appoint select board representative, town planner search committee. Christie.
Sure. So at the January 3rd meeting of the planning board, they created a search committee for the town planner position. The current town planner will be leaving his position at the end of March. The search committee's charge is to evaluate candidates for the position of town planner and recommend a minimum of 2 finalists for the planning board's consideration for appointment. They compose the committee of 2 planning board members, Lester Hensley as the immediate former chair of the master plan committee, myself as town manager, Chris Pant, public works director, Fred Leonardo, community development director, and then also they're looking for a select board representative to this committee.
Great, thank you.
Ian,
Yes,
if I may, I'd be willing to serve in this capacity if the board so chooses, being the liaison to the planning board and also our representative to the master planning committee.
okay, thank you, Patrick. Open up to others if others have interest here as well. And thank you for volunteering.
Always interest, no time.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Interest,
So I
but
appreciate
given
Patrick.
the work of the Housing Trust right now, I've got my hands full.
Okay. So somebody want to make a motion?
Did Did you have interest, Ian?
No.
Okay, 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 all right, okay. I just wanted,
I'd
yeah,
do it, but
think we're all
similar
interested.
in
Right,
the
right. Okay, yeah, so
time
I'll
commitment.
make
so.
a motion to appoint Patrick Welch as the Select Board representative to the Town Planner Search Committee.
Edinburgh seconds.
Okay, that's moved and seconded. Any further comments or questions? If not, roll call vote. Patrick?
Welch, yes.
Alan?
Edinburgh, yes.
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes.
Okay, thank you, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick.
Sure. Thank you for bestowing the trust in me.
Okay, Chief, you ready? Okay, now we're going to move back to the agenda. This is the promotional and swearing in ceremony of Fire Lieutenant Corey Anderson.
So just before I started tonight, I just wanted to say thank you to Wendy Mickle. I know her time is winding down, and she has always been instrumental in helping us swear in people through some of their best times of their career within our organization. So I really just wanted to take a minute and say thanks for all that you've done for us. Thanks. So one of the most important ceremonies in the fire service is the swearing in of new firefighters. This is where it all starts and where we truly make an impression, and we hope to make an impact on people's lives. This is when we confirm that firefighters are being welcomed into a special family, and we tell them from the beginning that they are going to be held accountable, that they're going to wear a badge, and it's that wearing that badge is going to be considered an honor and a privilege. And this is where we make them raise their right hand and swear to do the right thing all of the time. During their careers, firefighters work hard to master their craft. Some choose to forward their education, whether it is at the collegiate level, at the Mass Fire Academy, where hopefully they achieve certifications, or via any training opportunity that presents themselves. This readying for future leadership within the organization actually starts on day one. When a firefighter is ready and an opportunity presents itself, they often choose to take part in the department's promotional process. All of these things require significant time and commitment, and they are very stressful, not only on the firefighters, but also to their families. For this, I'd like to say thank you to the families for allowing your significant others to make a commitment to the challenging process. So thank you, Ashley, and kids. So the process that they go through to get to where we are here tonight is very time-consuming, and we started this on or about July 1st of last year, 2022. The process included reading and studying approximately 2,000 pages of material within 3 books, taking a written multiple choice exam that was prepared by an outside vendor, taking part in a review board assessment, which included tactical and human resource challenges, and the board was made up of outside fire officers, particularly chief officers. Then they were ranked following that, and that rank was certified by the department in Local 3070. And the top 3 scorers were then able to move forward into an administrative interview with myself. At the conclusion of this, one candidate is appointed to the position of lieutenant. And that's what brings us here tonight for the second most important ceremony in the fire service. This is where we formally recognize an individual, where they're about to become a mentor and a coach, as well as the point person to make critical decisions that may affect civilians and our very own crews. There are very high expectations of the lieutenant on our fire department, which is why I'm privileged to be here to oversee the swearing in of Lieutenant Corey Anderson. Corey was appointed to the Westborough Fire Department on December 11th, 2013, and has served on Group 1 for all of his career until now. He resides in Auburn, is married to his wife Ashley, and has 2 sons, Parker and Beckett. He has a master's degree of public education from Anna Maria College, and he's a certified emergency medical technician at the paramedic level. He holds Fire Officer 1 and Fire Officer 2 Pro Board certification, and he's a Pro Board fire instructor. He also is a member of the District 14 Technical Rescue Team, the District 14 Dive Rescue Team, and he manages the department's self-contained breathing apparatus and all the components that go along with that. He's also a major part of the fire and EMS training coordination that goes in within the department. We look forward to seeing Corey demonstrate his leadership abilities and know that he will work hard to keep his group safe every day when they report into work. So it's with great pleasure that I ask Corey to come forward and be sworn in by the town clerk. With him, he'll have his wife, his 2 children, his mom, and his father, who's going to pin him, Lieutenant Andrew Anderson from the Westford Fire Department. Yep. Come on up, everybody.
A little past nap time.
Us too.
Yes.
I, Corey Anderson. Do solemnly swear. That I will faithfully perform my duty. As Lieutenant Firefighter. For the town of Westborough, Massachusetts. To the best of my ability. To serve my commanding officers. With respect and dignity. To serve the citizens of Westborough. With compassion. Courage and integrity. And to uphold the laws. And the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So help me God.
Good job, guys.
So this is a very important day to memorialize an occasion like this, and we appreciate you letting us come before you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Corey.
Congrats.
Thank you for the rest of the team to be here as well. We appreciate all you in the back of the room there and all that you do for the town of Westborough. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a lot of tough things we do as a board. Those are some of the most enjoyable moments we have. So again, congratulations to new Lieutenant Corey Anderson. Okay, moving forward on our agenda, the next item we have is a lodging house permit hearing for Courtyard Marriott at 3 Technology Drive. I know we have a number of things that came in front of us and recent updates. So I do think we have representative here. If you want to come and just introduce yourself, and then Christy, I'll turn it to you with just providing us some updates too. So
Yeah, I'm Christopher Salo, the general manager at the Courtyard.
great, thank you. Christy, you want to give us?
So we are holding the hearing because the renewal package and the renewal of the license for 2023, the renewal package hasn't been completed. And so we did send notice to the Courtyard Marriott prior to January 1st, making them aware of that issue. Additionally, we made them aware of the concern related to their liquor license. And so they were served a letter letting them know that they could not serve any alcohol effective January 1st, 2023. They're here tonight related to their innkeeper and lodging license. They hadn't completed their certificate of inspection. And so I know that they have been working diligently with the town departments since I believe, I think in here it says that they had their site inspections on December 28th. And so we did receive an email from the Community Development Director, Building Commissioner Fred Leonardo, with a copy to the Fire Chief Pat Purcell, where they indicated that there were still some items outstanding, but the most critical of those was the fire sprinkler report, which they actually got this afternoon. And so they've reviewed that, And while there's a few maintenance items that they need to follow up on, both the fire chief and the community development director feel comfortable with allowing the license to remain in place, understanding that they need to continue to work forward to complete everything required of them for both that license and the liquor license.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for being here, and it's not we don't want to see you in front of us, and I'm sure you don't want to be here either. I do appreciate the work you've put in, and probably learning what needs to be done on an annual basis, and not to see it again. I do again appreciate you working towards that. As the town manager said, though, I think the expectation of us is that this continues. We get this wrapped up quickly.
Absolutely.
But at their recommendation, I'm comfortable with allowing them to basically continue the license to move forward and not be shut down, provided, though, that the things move forward as expected.
Thank you.
But I do open it up for the rest of the board for any questions or comments.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for being here before us. So first question, I'm curious to know, why did this happen? And then the second question is, what has been put in place to prevent it going forward?
Well, as to why, I recently just joined Jamson Management, who manages the courtyard. I came on in July, and of course, as a new GM to that property and to that management company, I was under the presumption that stuff was already in place to be taken care of. We had a fire protection company that was supposed to be taking care of the property. Unfortunately, things have come to pass that things were not being followed up upon by those who were there prior to my arrival. So it wasn't until probably December that we found out that we were so far behind on the current projects, and so been working with the owners and with Encore, who's now taking over as our protection agency, to get these matters taken care of.
And taking notes so you know what to do going forward. Yep.
Yes, sir.
Anything?
I'm just curious, what's the current status with respect to the liquor license and the common vittler's license for food service?
We haven't. They don't have their liquor license in place until the chief and the building department have signed off on the certificate of inspection.
Okay. And is the food license still being held as well? There was mention in the packet.
Yep, I have everything on my desk right now.
Okay.
So is it the expectation that if the lodging is permitted at this point, that all the necessary paperwork for everything else that Alan just mentioned can go forward, or are we still waiting on paperwork for the liquor license?
No, we're still waiting on paper. It's the same piece of information that's required as the certificate of inspection for both the liquor license as well as the innkeeper license. Under Mass General Law, we were able to hold the liquor license, but we needed the hearing in order to deal with the innkeeper license. If the board takes no action at this point, the innkeeper license remains in place. And then once a certificate of inspection is received by the town, then we would give them their liquor license so they could serve alcohol in 2023.
Okay.
And the food service would resume at that point too?
I just want to clarify, if I may. So when you say food service, so the common vittler allows you to consume food on premises, but
Right.
then the food service permits for the Board of Health are a separate process, though.
Okay, so the common vittler's license,
It's still being held.
it's still being held?
Yeah.
So I assume that means they're not serving breakfasts and making omelets to orders and things of that nature? Because you can't
We actually have not
held that?
we have not held that's not part of the hearing, and we haven't held that as far as I know.
Okay, I was just curious,
So
'cause there
we're
was
really
mention that
we're really
it was-
only talking about the liquor license and the
Okay.
the innkeeper
Okay,
license.
so that's still in place. I was just curious because it was mentioned in one of the notes.
And-
Okay, and is there a time frame for wrapping up the process?
Well, we're in negotiations right now to get, because our owners are out of town at the moment, so we are in process of talking with them and sending them all the necessary information so that they can sign off on getting all the other necessary projects signed off on so we can get those taken care of as quickly as possible.
So I think so our action here is, there's a couple things we could do. One is we could suspend, I think the recommendations of the town departments is not to do that, continue, as long as they continue down this path and we hear back from them. So I think, if I heard it correctly, for us to take no action, we don't need to make a motion. If we continue it, if we decide to suspend, we would need to take action.
Right, so what you could do is continue the hearing to your January 24th meeting, understanding that that might not be necessary if they do come forward with that completed COI.
Just as a point of clarification, I don't think it has any bearing on our decision here, but as I understand from the information in the packet, there is, I guess the original liquor, or the ABCC application has some names of individuals who may no longer be with the organization, so that is part of what also has to be corrected. Is that correct?
I think you're looking at email correspondence from November.
Okay.
And so the most recent status is that we were just waiting for their COI.
Okay, so that's been fixed.
So my understanding is that we have everything except for the COI.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks.
Okay?
But to further on that, we wouldn't give it to them unless everything was
Is in order, yeah, okay. So I guess I'm just not sure of the language of the motion.
So
It's
you
other-
could move to continue the hearing until January 24th. I would just have to look at a time.
So, but does that not allow them then to,
No, basically the license will be continued, because we're not suspending it, so.
right,
Right.
okay,
But
okay.
it's just, it will provide us an update, and hopefully things are complete, and we don't.
You're just giving notice at this point that we would expect you back if you don't complete
Okay, thank
everything
you.
by January 24th.
I just wasn't sure of the
Yeah.
language, thank you.
Yeah.
Want to make,
Real quick question. Ian?
yes. Sorry, Patrick, yep.
Just wondering if the manager feels that 2 weeks is sufficient time to make tangible updates to comply with the requirement for the 24th.
Well, from speaking with with Bill and with Ken today, who came and did our inspections, some of the items are more recommended for summer repairs because of the extent of which they have to be done. So in speaking of the fire hydrants that are on property, because of the massive water that would be released, so they would be afraid that like pipes would freeze. So that's a concern that they have going forward. And then there is a dry valve that has to be tested as well. Again, they suggest that's not something more that should be left for warmer weather, but we can proceed if the town is willing to help.
Have those things been reviewed with our department heads so that they're aware of those things that may need to be pushed off till warmer weather?
Yes, they've identified that. That was
Okay.
through conversation with our department heads.
Okay.
So it sounds like with this 2 weeks of those things,
May have
may have to be pended, but that the departments would be okay with that. That's been the discussion, and that they would issue the COI. So the hope is that all this occurs and the COI is issued prior to our next meeting, then we would not have to,
Okay, thank you.
Right.
correct?
You could, right. I mean, you could, I think Chief Purcell can comment on those two items because they're related to the fire.
I guess my question to the chief would be, so the COI can be issued, and then has to be reissued or then further certified that those items are closed out at some future point.
Well, I think the purpose of bringing them back to your meeting on January 24th is to understand what is still outstanding, understanding and to understand if items that could be done now, how they're moving forward. But you have that question for Chief.
Chief, any? Yep.
Excuse me, Patrick Purcell, Fire Chief. So the first two things that we've identified waiting, we don't need to wait till summer, but until spring, when it's warmer, is testing of the private hydrants in the yard. That is supposed to be done annually. And the second one was the that goes at the dry system inspector's valve, which discharges a lot of water out of the system into the parking lot, will create a freezing hazard. I would recommend having it done in the spring, because as we saw last year, as soon as we initiated drought restrictions, then there was some conversations that went on between the Public Works and myself with regard to the testing of those systems, so I would recommend getting it done early, so we don't have to challenge the guidelines of the state for water use.
Okay.
Anything else that's on there can certainly, we don't need to remove people from the hotel. They can stay there. This is, quite frankly, I don't think I could walk into any hotel in the country and not find things that are, unfortunately, things that are wrong, but this is how we spend a lot of our time, inefficiently chasing down stuff like this at the last minute. This is, you're getting a front seat view to it, and it's not fun, but we do have recourse if you do issue the CI through the non-criminal fire code violations. What you were asking about the food was actually their cooking hood was out of expiration again, and it was for at least the second time. We don't write a lot of tickets. I could tell you, I don't know the number. We write less than a half a dozen a year, but they're an escalating fine, $100 first offense, second is 500, and the third is 1,000. They were at 500 this time, but we usually do a lot of verbal notification before we ever write one. So it's at least twice. That was where the food issue was. That has since been done. The hood is cleaned and re-inspected and re-tagged. But with regard to moving forward, we do have recourse.
Great.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I think to those points where you're here and as new manager, it's similar to what we do on liquor license. And I said, our hope, and I'm sure your hope, is we don't see you back in here
That's
again
right.
in the future too. So, so I guess the motion, if folks are okay with it, would be to continue this hearing until our meeting on January 28th or January
24th
24th for a update on the status
at 7:15.
at 7:15.
So moved?
Second?
Any further comments or questions?
So just to be clear, the liquor license is held still, correct? So,
Correct.
but we are allowed to serve food,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
And lodge.
And lunch.
Well, just breakfast, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
and keep people there.
And keep
obviously.
Yeah.
people
in
can
the room.
stay too.
Okay.
And I think our hope is that you move as quickly as possible, and I think on our side we've continued that hearing. But if
Things are
if
wrapped up.
everything's all wrapped up and we don't need it, and that will be fine too. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote. Patrick
Welch, yes?
Edinburgh, yes?
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes.
That's 4-0 for being present. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda, sorry about that, putting an R in the end there, was item 5, which was recognition of Employee of the Year. However, Mrs. Story could not make it this evening, so we are going to postpone that and put it on our next agenda. So we will move past that.
Paul's not here yet.
Yep, so I know that,
To 9.
let's move to item, you say 9?
Yep.
Okay. So item 9 is the appointment of Assistant Town Clerk, Deborah Ledoux, to temporary town clerk. Christie, anything?
Yep, so as we discussed at the last meeting, the town clerk, Wendy Mickle, is retiring on January 27th, and the board has the opportunity or option to appoint a temporary town clerk to fill the position until the next election. That's consistent with the actions that you took in 2013 when Nancy Andrigo retired as town clerk prior to the end of her term expiring. So included in your packet is a letter from the current assistant town clerk, Debbie Ledoux, as well as a letter of recommendation from the current town clerk for Debbie's appointment as temporary town clerk. In addition to your appointment of her, because she's coming out of a union position, we would also be creating an agreement with the union to hold her position should she not have a favorable outcome in her election. And so the motion tonight would be to appoint her, as well as to authorize me to enter into an agreement with the union.
Great. Is there a motion?
Yes, I move pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 14, to appoint Deborah Ledoux as temporary town clerk to complete the current term until the 2023 election.
Second.
Do you want, does that cover, I think you want, and authorize?
And to authorize me to enter into an agreement with the union.
And further authorize the town manager to enter into an appropriate agreement with the union.
Second.
Okay, moved and second. Any comments or questions? Thank you, Debbie, for your interest. Thank you again, Wendy, for all your work, too. And that's not the time, but we definitely appreciate the work you've done. So, anything else from the board? If not, roll call vote. Patrick?
I'll just say real quick, Debbie, thank you very much for stepping up and fulfilling the role until the election. Always look forward to talking to you and the folks in the office there. So great to have you in that position. Welch, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes.
So that's 4-0, 4 being present. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
We can also do 8.
Is Paul just come in there?
But I think Linda's here.
Okay, let's do number 8 as well then, and then we'll move back to item 6. So item 8 is the request for concurrence with town manager appointment of Linda Smith as treasurer collector. Christie.
Yep. So as the board's aware, our previous treasurer collector left the position on December 16th. He's now serving as the interim treasurer collector, as was appointed. We did a full recruitment for the position, and held interviews, and so I'm recommending that we appoint Linda Smith, who is our current assistant town accountant, as the treasurer collector. Linda's been an exemplary employee for several years and really invaluable in supporting the treasurer collector's office, which has seen a considerable amount of turnover in both responsibility, having brought payroll in-house, as well as personnel during her time with the town. So I hope the board will concur with my appointment.
And just to note with this is, due to the agreement we have with the former treasurer collector, now interim with the contract requirements, so this is intended for her position to begin on February 6th, correct?
Correct. Yep. So she's starting to train with the interim treasurer collector, and will continue to, which will give us time to give the 14-day termination notice to the interim treasurer collector.
Perfect. Who I see sitting in the back there, so. Okay, is there a motion?
Sure. I move to concur with the town manager's appointment of Linda Smith to serve as treasurer collector beginning on February 6, 2023, for a term to expire on June 30th, 2026.
Second.
Okay, any comments or questions from the board?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yep.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, all those in favor, roll call vote. Patrick?
Welch, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes.
4-0, 4 being present. Yes, Linda, congratulations. We appreciate what you've done for the town so far and look forward to you moving into your new role. So, thank you.
For both of them.
Okay, so now we're going to move back to item 6 on the agenda, which is a request from the Rotary Club to hold their annual 5K fun run at Lake Chauncey. And Mr. Riley, right? You want to come forward? Yep, come to the front. It's your moment in the spotlight on TV.
Fabulous.
Yeah. Just want to introduce yourself and.
Hello, I'm Paul Riley. It's good to be with you all. Thank you for your time. I'm here on behalf of the Rotary Club of Westborough as the chairman of our 5K and Fun Run Committee. We are requesting your approval to use Lake Chauncey for the venue and to do it on June 17th, which is Father's Day weekend. And we're also requesting your approval for a one-day alcohol license to have and serve beer and potentially wine at the event as well. So in context, or for context, we've done 17 of these in the past. Most of them have been on at a different venue and a different course in, starting and ending at the high school, and then running up Main Street over Eli Whitney and come down on Ruggles. It's the same route as the Turkey Trot, and very familiar with the town and many of the runners. We've never really gotten a lot of traction with the event. In the past, we've maybe had 100 to 150 runners. We've made a little bit of money and had a decent time from it. But feedback from many of the runners are that the course is terrible. It's mostly uphill and then all downhill. And it's the same course. So we prefer to do it at the Lake Chauncey site where we formerly used to do a very involved and busy triathlon. And in the year of the 300th, which I guess was 2017, we did a 5K and a 10K at that same venue, and it was very well attended. We'd like to expand the event to be more of a health fair and focus more just on general health and invite businesses from around the town to exhibit and showcase that are associated with health, yoga or gyms or massage therapists and that kind of thing, chiropractors. And so they have an opportunity to engage the community as well, and then make it a fun event for families. So that is our request. We have done some due diligence already. I met with Deputy Chief Minardi, and he was fully supportive of it. He never really felt comfortable safety-wise with the old course, and he was very kind to us in kind of keeping a minimal number of officers that to help us with costs. But he always felt that we relied on too many volunteers and whatnot to make that course safe and to lock up Main Street for that period of time. So he was very much in favor of moving over to Lake Chauncey, which is much less disruptive to the town and traffic. I've worked with Jennifer in the rec department, so the facilities or the location is available. We're not conflicting with Westborough Youth Soccer or anything like that. And I suspect that there's some other requirements or requests that we meet with the other departments to make sure we're communicating and coordinating. So.
Perfect. Yeah, and we had a number of things in our package already from definitely Deputy Chief Minardi. I think there was some stuff in from the DPW director, whatever, but I think in our motion we'll just ensure that happens. But I would look for a motion from the board. Shelby?
Yep, sure.
I guess before making a motion, I have a question. Would be a separate request and motion with respect to the one-day liquor permit?
I actually approved the one-day liquor
Okay.
license, so you'll have to go through that process in our office. And then once we have all the information we need, we can
Okay.
approve it without a board
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay.
And we've done that in the past, at least 3 or 4 times, and you guys have been very supportive, so thank you for that. And we understand the need for control and safety, and there's like a particular certification that we need to get to make sure we're
Yeah.
doing it.
Tip certified.
Yep.
So we can add town manager to the list of departments,
Okay.
Correct.
just for that purpose.
Yep. Yeah, and we've done that for other groups. We've done it for Cultural Council, for the Arts and Common, when they have the beer as well, so.
Yep.
Perfect.
Great, so I move to approve the use of Lake Chauncey Fields by the Rotary Club for the purpose of hosting a 5K fun run to include food trucks and a beer tent, possibly wine, subject to the Rotary Club obtaining the necessary approvals and/or permits as appropriate from the Recreation Department, Police Department, Fire Department, Department of Public Works, Board of Health, and Town Manager for June 17, 2023.
Second?
Okay, any further comments or questions from the board? Nope, look forward to you hosting this, great event. All those in favor, Patrick?
I look forward to attending the event as well. Welch, yes. Thank you.
Edinburgh, yes?
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes?
It's 4-0, 4 being present. Thanks for coming forward, and I look forward to it. And looks like you've started already with the approvals, so just make sure you continue there. And any help you need, definitely feel free to come through the town manager's office for any guidance.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your
Great.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Time to start training.
Yeah. Still recovering from the turkey trot, so. Okay, item 10 on our agenda. Are we ready for that. I know we're ahead of schedule here. I know Chris is here, but,
Yeah.
yeah, are you ready, or? Okay.
Is Wendy here? She have something else to-
I don't think so, yeah.
All right, I didn't know if we were holding on. Not, you know. Yeah, okay, maybe she's,
It's,
oh. Wanna do that?
no.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're ready. We're ready.
We are ready, if you're ready.
So good evening, Chris Pant, Director of Public Works. May recall we were here a few weeks ago talking about the Stormwater Utility Fund. We spoke to the AFC last night, and so tonight we're going to elaborate on a little bit more of the process and next steps. Rich Niles is here from Woodard and Kern. He's going to walk us through a few charts, and then really have some discussion if that's appropriate. If you have any questions, and then wrap it up. So we'll
Perfect.
get started.
Thanks. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. Happy New Year. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to start with a quick recap of December 13th meeting, because it's good to refresh after the holidays, get the holiday fog out of the brain. And I guess maybe in some ways for public benefit for anybody that might be watching. So I just wanted to cover, we're talking about how we fund stormwater program needs. We evaluated those needs, future needs in the gap. A lot of it relates to capital projects. We're looking at about a $1.5 million program. So I'll cover that pretty quick. And really the fundamental discussion is around how do we fund that additional need. Via taxes, tax increase, standard business, or do we consider stormwater utility a user fee-based approach to charge a fee for stormwater? And there's several advantages to doing that. We talked about this, I won't belabor the points, but some of the key advantages are being able to leverage a dedicated source of revenue for outside funding sources, being able to pledge that for match, knowing that money is already there or coming, so that we can plan a program and have a more proactive and thoughtful program to meet these needs. It's flexible, so we can use the money in different ways. So we can use it for engineering, for capital, for bonding, et cetera. And then one of the other factors is that this approach, when we look at the relationship between stormwater runoff and impervious area, it makes more sense, and it seems more equitable in many ways than simply increasing taxes and charging for people on the basis of the property value. So those are kind of the fundamental differences in why we're considering this approach. And this is these are the takeaways. I tried to be careful with the language here, that the town is recognizing these needs. So I think this is what we took away from last meeting, and I thought it's just helpful to kind of reiterate some of those key points. Recognizing that there are additional needs, we're looking at about a $1.5 million program. It could be more or less. That's still to be determined, but that's currently what we're considering. And there's consensus that a stormwater utility approach makes sense. General agreement that it makes sense to advance this, and it seems like a viable source or mechanism for funding the program. Support for a tiered approach, something that was a bit more equitable for single-family residential, not too complicated, and then some factor of that would be applied to anything other than single-family residential. And again, rate structure is something that can be modified. It's something we can still modify, but getting some sense and feedback from the board was helpful, that this is seemingly a preferred approach. And then general support to consider authorizing establishment of a stormwater utility via bylaw at town meeting, and supporting funding to implement the stormwater user fee. So that's what we're here tonight to consider further and discuss in a bit more detail. And then lastly, acknowledgement by everybody that this is a process. Implementation does take time. So it's, there's a lot that needs to happen before that, but there's some key steps, and those key steps are really what we want to focus on tonight, is how do we continue to advance this, knowing that a bill, even if, when a bill were actually to be sent out, it's 12 to 18 months from now, and there's decision processes and public input along the way. So those are kind of the key takeaways, and unless anybody wants to correct anything I misspoke on, I'll just carry on.
Yeah, just the comment, the third bullet there, just sort of that seems to suggest to me that we came to agreement on a tiered rate approach, and a multiplier for all other properties. I certainly remember the discussion. I don't recall that we said that was the approach that we kind of recommended. And I'm not suggesting we get into that here, but I just don't know how much that predicts the part of the discussion you want to get into. So am I remembering something different?
So I was trying to, like I said, I was trying to be careful with my words.
I know. Well,
And
it says
I didn't say
recommendations by
agreement.
town staff. So I
Yeah.
just, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's probably a tax assessor component. There's an administrative element to this. That there's certainly DPW. I just want to understand what that third bullet means to all of us here. If that's still part of an element that has to be kind of hammered out, so to speak, and does that have
Yeah.
to be? But that detail would have to be in the bylaw, correct?
Well, and so I think we can address that when we get into the discussion of the bylaw.
Okay. Okay.
But I think what I was trying to say here, I guess, was that the board had support for the recommendations that town staff provided.
Okay.
We didn't agree upon that and vote to say that that's what we're gonna do.
Yep.
And jumping ahead a little bit, I guess, because it's helpful just to frame that as we go into the next slide, is the bylaw contents, there's some parts that are flexible, there's some parts that we can put in or we can take out. And so rates, the final rate structure and the final rate setting is a process. And so there's a couple different ways we can approach it with the bylaw, and I think we'll get into
Okay.
that with that slide, but
Thank you.
yeah, I agree that we didn't make a decision. It's not set in stone,
Okay.
so.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think I supportive is probably correct, as I understood it. It's kind of supportive of the recommendation that was presented to us and to move
Yeah.
that forward, but.
Well, as I recall, my confusion here is there were multiple kind of scenarios or options presented, and there was sort of,
Right.
and we talked about all of them in depth.
Yeah, but my sense was that there was an informal consensus that creating the billing unit structure was the most equitable.
Right.
As far as it most directly relates to a property's impact on the stormwater system.
Okay, yep.
So,
Yeah, and I think it was more of the work that's been done by staff
Yep.
was to bring that forward, and but yeah, it's still open for discussion.
Okay.
All of it is.
Okay, yep, sure.
So yeah,
Thank you.
okay. See, it's
Yeah.
good. It's good to
Yep.
calibrate. Good to
Except-
calibrate after.
Sorry, we have Patrick on. Patrick, son, thanks for jumping in, because we can't see you on the
Oh,
screen here,
okay.
but definitely,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, from my vantage point, when we last met, first of all, thank you for pulling together the material and bringing it back to us again to refresh us on this. Conceptually, I think my takeaway from the last meeting was conceptually we like the idea of moving forward with this, but I get what is trying to be accomplished here. I would suggest that if we move this forward in order to get my support of this, and I think probably likely the support of the wider community, is if it's put more in layman's terms in regards to what is this actually going to cost the taxpayer? What are they going to get for their dollar, right? This is an additional utility that's going to be above and beyond their existing tax base. So what actual service can the average homeowner get, and what is that annual anticipated cost going to be based on those rates, those rates? And I know there's work to be done around better understanding the GIS data for the impervious surfaces and whatnot. And I'm just curious, between now and town meeting in March, do you think that you're going to be prepared to provide that level of detail going into town meeting and to this board beforehand so that we can better understand it and possibly support it.
I would suggest that you let him move through his slides, because there's a slide on
Public
the
engagement.
bylaw as well as the public engagement plan.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, but no, but comments duly noted. You know, that's, messaging is important to the public. So you hit two really good things. What's it gonna cost me? Because that's what people care about. And what am I getting for it? You know, so we can definitely message that. I think, again, you know, as we get into this, I think, you know, Krista, to your point, this is the process that we need to vet ourselves to be comfortable with. Is this the right approach? What goes into the bylaw, what doesn't? So there's, you know, that's why we're here. So, yeah. So yeah, I'll keep that in mind as we get into it a bit more. But so we talked last time, there's a question or comment about next steps. So what does implementation of next steps look like? So if we say it makes sense to advance this to implementation, knowing that that's many steps that cost money. There's some things that the town needs our assistance with to do so. And so what we're proposing is a preliminary budget figure of $150,000. And these next steps, I don't need to read all of them, but we haven't scoped it in detail with Chris, but this is going off of what I've done in the past, generally what it takes to do this at this stage in the process. So we've calibrated that number, but it's not we haven't sent a proposal to the town. There's some fine details that we'd have to work out, but the general next steps are outlined here, which is some level of public engagement support. We generally try to push that to the town, so you guys do that and don't have to pay engineers to do it, but we're happy to support that in some capacity. Refining the data, so there's a process for doing that generally. When we talk about sort of the basic rate structure, the reason we like to get an understanding of preference is if somebody says, well, we'd like to build down to the 100 square foot, well, that's going to cost $100,000 to get the data to be able to do that. You know, that takes a lot of effort to do. So policy does in some way drive the data need and the cost, just for the initial setup, you know, but as well as the maintenance of that information going forward. So with that, we then do final financial analysis. We may refine the program cost a little bit. You know, we're still doing an average over the first 3 years. You know, what does it look like? Are we doing rate modifiers for certain users to address, you know, properties that are impacted that we think a little bit more adversely? So final financial analysis needs to occur, and that's where there's more input from town staff, the board, before we have final rates that are set. So when we communicate this to the public for town meeting, we've done preliminary analysis. We think the funding mechanism makes sense, and we want to advance to implementation to help refine all those things. But we don't have all the answers because we haven't spent the money to get them yet, you know. But we can, and that's really what we're asking for people to support. So certain things need to be established as a matter of documentation, policies. We could choose to put some of the information from the bylaw into a set of regulations that accompany the bylaw, where final rate setting occurs outside of town meeting framework. It's just simpler. That's how a lot of things are handled with utility rates. So we support some of those policies, and you know, there's some kind of pound of paper we got to generate to back it up, and support the decisions that were made, and ultimately creating a billing account file so that we can send out bills. So there's some data work that needs to be done, integrating with billing. So we've taken a cursory look at those things, and based upon, you know, our experience with similar projects, there is also some level of support. Once you send out bills, you're going to get phone calls, you know. So we generally kind of build a little bit of that in there for us to support the town staff. So that's kind of how we come up with those steps and associated cost. And those are, you know, they may shift a little bit in terms of effort, and that's something we haven't refined just yet with DPW, but this is a pretty good budget figure from our standpoint. And then just looking at the timeline a little bit, realistically, to do that process, have some public input, you know, and again, this is following town meeting, assuming that whatever we propose for warrant articles advances. If funding isn't authorized to implement, there's nothing else to do. We'd have to wait for more funding. Let's just say that that passes, we wouldn't send a bill out until probably second quarter 2024. You know, so there's a great, you know, there's obviously a lag in terms of developing and finalizing the rates to sending out bills and actually collecting revenue. You know, so it doesn't happen overnight. I guess that's probably the important message. If people think that this is going too quickly and being, you know, rushed, it's a process. It's going to take time. So I guess in terms of just to kind of frame, you know, sort of next steps, what we're looking at is considering a warrant article to establish a stormwater enterprise account. This is just typically how a lot of other communities do it. You have a warrant article that says we're going to authorize creation of an account. We're going to put money into that account to fund implementation, and that's going to become the stormwater revolving account, or stormwater enterprise, or whatever you want to call it. So that's kind of one item, and then the next on the next slide here is going to be the bylaw. So I guess we kind of wanted to open up to discussion in terms of that particular item being considered for as a warrant article.
Yes, my question there is, trying to think it sequentially, it's in thinking of town meeting or the warrant, it would be kind of a bylaw first, because if a bylaw doesn't pass, then we can't really do anything, right? But if a bylaw passes, then we would create the enterprise account and then, in essence, vote the funding. Is that accurate, or?
Well, yeah, so if we don't have funding, we can't do anything else. So you can implement the bylaw to establish the authority to charge a fee, but we can't actually do all the work to set the rate and implement that fee. So if you don't authorize funding, we have nowhere to go. Now, a lot of communities choose to do a bylaw to establish authority before you commit to spending money, right? So that kind of makes sense, right. But then people say, well, I need more information to understand everything in the bylaw or everything that this fee is going to result in. So we're sometimes caught in kind of a chicken egg scenario where you need enough information for people to feel comfortable that it makes sense, knowing that some of the details will be worked out later, and we want to authorize funding. So we've seen communities do it a couple different ways. Establishing authority is a representation of commitment too.
Right, but so I think to your question, so both of the warrant articles are proposed for the annual town meeting warrant, and the ordering of them is the bylaw and then the funding is how I've ordered it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sort of makes sense.
Yep.
And I just happened to put this one slide first.
Yep.
Because, I mean, and again, communities take different approaches. I've seen communities authorize implementation, spend the money, and get to the point where you have to authorize the fee, and it gets tabled. So we've just spent all that money. And some of it, you know, helps build the program, you get better data out of it, but no one's going to benefit from having a master account file that doesn't get sent out for bills. So, so that's generally the approach that we see in a lot of communities. They do implement a bylaw or an ordinance as part of this process. So,
But to your specific point about sequence, while our recommendation, the way Chrissy just described it in terms of town meeting, is the bylaw, then the implementation. We could defer the bylaw because someone says they want more study done, and we could authorize some funding that allows us to spend more money to do more analysis. And that's an option. I mean, to the point made earlier about, you know, what are we going to get out of this and how much is it going to cost? We're not going to have a whole lot of detail by town meeting, but that's sort of purposeful, because if we want to commit to something like this, we're going to show you as much as we can, but the real homework is done. It doesn't make any sense, at least in my mind, to spend a whole lot of money doing all the homework only to find out at the end of the day nobody wants it. So if there's a demonstration of commitment to this concept and recognition that, you know, the cost to the town in terms of actual ratepayer costs is within some bracket. I mean, we've already given some sort of window of what the costs might be, then as long as we're, within that window that we said we would be within when we presented it, a month ago, and we'll continue to do so, then that's the assurance we're gonna be able to provide, without spending a whole lot of money to do a lot of analysis. But it's the chicken egg thing that Rich has said, and it's really just about, we're not trying to rush this through. We're not trying to pull one over on anybody, but it's a lot of work to get to the final, rate that's set that you will have to approve. So even if we passed the bylaw, did all this work, came back and said, here's the plan, and for whatever reason, in 10 months, opinions changed, then we just wouldn't implement it. I mean,
So we would have done the work, and we have a baseline to work from, but we would be out about 150,000, the work done, and a plan somewhat ready to implement. Is that correct? If we were to pass the bylaw,
yes.
if we were to authorize the funding of the enterprise fund, and then ultimately not come to agreement on the rates and what have you, and it just stalls, then we would have done the work, and it's sort of shelf ready, for lack of a better way to say it, sort of.
Yes.
Yeah, I would imagine. it'd be-
Shovel ready.
Yeah.
'cause
I
it's
imagine
legal.
it would be, to that point, it would be a tweaking of the
Yeah,
funding,
I'm not
whatever
saying it
that's-
should, I'm just saying, I guess I'm trying to say the work would not be for, like, lost. They wouldn't just be, we went through this exercise, we spent a fair amount of money. To your point, Ian, it would just have to be maybe tweaked, what is the issue, maybe I don't know, we have to go deeper into the data, I don't know.
It's my sense is by starting with the bylaw, you get consensus saying, yes, conceptually, this is a better way to manage and maintain and improve the stormwater system. And then approving the funding for implementation says, okay, now we're gonna go figure out what the rates are and the detail of the structure on, for the implementation. At which point it can be, well, the feedback could be current economy, those rates would be too high, so we take the program from 1.5 million to 1.2 or 1 million, right? But the concept that a stable source of funding that's predictable, that can be used for bonding more easily, that allows for long-term planning, that charges as accurately as you really, reasonably can based on the impact property has on the stormwater system as opposed to the value of the property, would be the way we want to move forward, so.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. I'm just thinking of the, how articles play out and conversations play out leading up to and actually on town meeting floor. So, Chris, I think you always do a great job of really clearly articulating what it is that the voters are considering. I think, understanding these, almost presenting these two as together, you're gonna, you're gonna hear two articles, here's what one is for, here's about the other, but we're presenting them together, because I think if you just present the bylaw, there's gonna be this part of like, well, how much is this gonna, it's gonna just lead into this swirling question. So we've had the benefit of hearing it twice, and we're still,
I've been sending people the links to the video.
Right. No, so anyway.
No, it's totally legitimate point. I mean, that's gonna be the challenge at town meeting, is that, in my opinion, is when someone hears bylaw and new rate, okay, how much is it gonna cost me? And we will be able to give, hey, it's probably gonna cost about this much, but that could change. If we decided to lower it based on circumstance, we can do that. But people have to understand that that's, like, they're not signing up for the rate at town meeting. They're signing up for the concept that will then be defined over the coming months and then come back to you for approval of
Right,
that
and this
rate.
also.
This is work that needs to be done.
Right, and part of that conversation is, people always hear, the new number, right? So, I'm trying to remember from the last meeting what the billing unit was somewhere around $60 a year or that range, plus or minus. We don't know what it is yet, but, so someone hears, oh man, it's another $60, dollars a year. One of the questions that we need to be very clear on is, what does that replace? I went back and looked in our capital plans and town meeting, and on average over the last 5 years, we've spent between $500,000 and $600,000 a year on stormwater projects. And so those costs come out, right? These projects won't be part of the general debt service for the town. They'll be, through the enterprise fund, not through the tax level. And so, yes, we know we need additional funding to properly maintain and manage the $112 million in assets we have. And part of this process is we'll figure out exactly what that level should be per year, and the proposal is $1.5 million a year. But by funding through the utility, we are replacing the funding that's been done through the general budget, from free cash, and from general debt service that ends up on the tax levy. So it's not bad, but it's not 100%, I guess is my point. And that'll be challenging to communicate and get people to,
And to add on to that, the 1.5, that's being discussed now as the proposed budget, proposed number, we're not budgeting to that now. I mean, that's the whole reason we're standing here, is because we're not doing that. So,
Right.
so you're saying it's 500 average over the last 5 years or whatever, whatever that number is, but really it should be 3 times that.
Right.
And that's 3 times more in terms of whatever that relates to in taxes. So, so there's.
Yeah,
Yeah, Patrick, go ahead.
sorry. I realize you guys can't see me, so just jumping in here. So, Alan, I see your head, and it's kind of exactly what I was thinking of. I think that, and Chris, I appreciate all the hard work that's been done here to get to this point. Using the numbers that Alan just said, if for $500,000 a year we got X, I'd like to know, and I think the taxpayers would like to know, for my $60 or whatever that average amount is, or whatever that bracket is of potential cost to the taxpayers, based on the $500,000 that we spend on this a year, how many culverts, how many retaining basins, et cetera, are being repaired, and how many could we expect if it jumps, if we increase and create this utility and we provide $1.5 million of funding to it? What would the taxpayer expect to get? Are they going to get 3 times that $500,000 that we're getting today? That's just where I'm headed. That's the type of information I'm thinking that you'll need to bring to the conversation to get buy-in. Putting the bylaw in, people are going to want to understand that. I get the point, and I completely support the idea that we're going to have further conversations around what that rate should be if in fact the town does vote in for this. And it could stall over time because we don't come to an agreement. In order to take that first big step, I think that's part of it. I would also just ask, as you look at that data and understand it, and potentially bring in more data to us in the coming months leading to town meeting, are there opportunities to provide any sort of utility relief, hardship relief for any residents? For our elderly, our fixed income, our veterans, our disabled, et cetera, is something I'd ask you to also look into, and I'm not sure what is provided under Mass General Law for this particular utility, but I'd be curious.
Thanks, Patrick. So I just had a question too, because we talked about it, but just so I understand, and I think we're part of the process for the residents and the voters, is these 3, we talk about 2 here, but then the bylaw, those are the 3 items that need to go through town meeting, get their approval. Post that, rate setting, and this is a question, so I'm stating it, it's like I know, but I don't know, so it's a question, but the actual rate setting, similar to water bills, sewer, water and sewers based off of water, but is, that is set by the select board. So I guess, the question is, if these 3 go through and they are voted, town meeting has basically approved this stormwater utility implementation process, and
There would not be a future.
Yeah, what would be future stuff would just be approving of projects and expenditures out of the enterprise account, similar to what we do for sewer and water today. But rate setting is not set by town meeting, it would be set by us as the board.
Right.
Correct.
And that's how it's written in the bylaw. Yeah.
Correct. But just to be
Yes.
clear, and for
Yep.
residents to be clear, because
Yep.
it's gonna,
Yep.
I can see that being the question at town meeting is, hey, I approve this, what else do I approve? Well, you've approved it, you've given, discretion back to the board, similar to on water and sewer, to set rates, and then, you will get billed at those rates, but then any expenditures that come out of that have to be approved by town meeting, because they have to appropriate any monies from anything, just like they do for sewer, water, country club, any other enterprise funds that we have today.
Yes, but they would have like a way to influence that rate by working through you, however that process works, so they could,
Not electing us, or.
Right?
Well, I mean, how, if you're gonna do it in a meeting like this, they could obviously have the opportunity to speak about it. So-
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a
So-
public
so
meeting,
they-
to set the
I mean,
rates.
there is
Set
oppor-
the rates, exactly.
There is
Yep.
opportunity for them to be heard again. It's not
Correct.
like it's, you at town meeting and you're done.
No, absolutely, but it's just not a town meeting vote, so it's just,
Correct.
again,
Yes.
I thought that's what it was, I just wanted to be clear, because I'm
Good
sure it'd be questions, so,
Yeah.
okay.
The other thing too is the alternative is Chris is gonna request more money,
Right.
as he always has. It's just a bigger number.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's important to consider, when we present this to the public, the messaging as well as at town meeting, is that, and then we're not developing an alternate article, correct, for other funding, so, I don't know what until the fee is implemented and revenue's coming in, there is a lag in what might be available for funding. So if it doesn't move forward, we need an alternative. So I think it's if people hear new fee and they're unsure about it, it's like, well, we could just raise taxes. We don't want to do that either.
Yeah.
So it's just setting expectations is important.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, just to speak to Alan's commentary a little bit, is setting, we're not setting rates. We're giving people a
Right.
sense of the order of magnitude. So when we say the average, the smaller homes are going to pay $50-$60 a year, medium size are going to pay around 100, 100 and a quarter, and so on. Those are approximations, right? But we're setting an expectation that we can't come back and say it's going to be 300.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
And that's, I
You
think,
guys
to be
won't allow
clear.
it, and
Yeah.
the public will be concerned about that. So, and people have, obviously there's lots of other concerns about rate creep and other things that can occur in the future. Hey, you're sliding this in now, we're just gonna jack the program up. It's like, well, so we have to set expectations and do our best to meet those as the process gets implemented.
And-
Go ahead.
Sorry, and just, also part of the conversation is the cost of not making the change, right? And that sort of the way funding, continuing along the traditional path we've used to fund stormwater management. I recall a culvert on Mount Pleasant,
Warren.
or I'm sorry, Warren Street, that failed. Deferred maintenance always costs you more down the road, and that was years of re-engineering and homes flooded and damage to the roadway. There was a heavy storm where years ago part of Bowman washed out because the culvert, wasn't
Chestnut Street washed out.
whatever, things of that
We've
nature.
had a lot of these.
And so suddenly, a repair that might cost tens or even hundreds of thousands costs hundreds of thousands or millions because of the ancillary damage. And so
Yes.
I just think as we communicate with the public, setting the expectation that this isn't just about grabbing more money, it's about being much more strategic, and as you made in the presentation last month, much more responsible in forward planning that lets you do things more efficiently in the long run.
Yep. I think it's spot on. I do think it's, to Patrick's earlier question, this one, because I hear what he's saying, I do believe this one will be a little bit more difficult for people to get their hands around, because to the point of, well, what does it mean to me? It's not like, hey, you're not going to get water to your house, or you don't get, sewerage out of your house, you need a septic system, whatever. It's not like personal and, in that, but it's really personal about the community and what we're doing here. And to the things that we've brought up, those are things that are important to us broadly, and the lack of doing that and continuing business the way it is that we're gonna have more and more of these incidents that are, may not affect you personally, but will affect your neighbors or other folks in town, and a number of them, because we have to, you know, it will affect you in your pocketbook. But
Right,
we
it
also
will.
have to shut down roads, and we have to, you know, utilize.
And
or
eventually
stuff.
you have to pay.
And eventually have to pay for it, so better to be proactive. So everything that went through the last time. So I think it's, I know you're giving us updates here. We have the benefit of having the last one, but it is gonna be work, as Patrick's way earlier comment was, and I think you'll get to that in the end of this presentation, about how we communicate this to the public, but it is, you know, it's not as much a direct impact, hey, you pay this and you get this, you pay this and, you know, the benefit to all of us comes from that, so.
Yeah, it is a little challenging because it's new. You know, we can draw similarities to other utilities. You know, there's a lot of things that people pay through taxes that they don't realize benefit from.
Yeah.
So availability of service, availability of the use of facilities is a thing you pay for even if you don't have a direct benefit, right? So, but people will dissect it, and we have answers to all these things.
Yep.
It's been done in lots of other communities. It's not a new concept. You know, so I think this is all very helpful for the public education messaging component to this. And ultimately, I guess what I would leave that part of it with is there absolutely has to be political support. There has to be enough political will to get behind it and say, okay, this is a thoughtful program. We put time and energy into this for a reason. We support it, and we think it's the better alternative to fund this program. And there's lots of advantages, you know. So that's critical. Every study I've done, and the ones that are successful, it doesn't have anything to do with how well I do my job. And I'm open to criticism if I can do it better, certainly. But it comes down to whether the community has the political will to advance something and push for something that's new. And part of that process is helping you guys understand that, to have a level of comfort so you know what's being presented, you know what's next, et cetera. So,
Yep.
So that this feedback is very important. So should we move on to the bylaw a little bit more?
Sure.
Sorry, Shelby.
Yeah,
you have a-
no, that's where my
Okay.
question was going, so I'd rather hear your
Yeah.
presentation and,
You're like, all right, move on, please.
yeah.
So, I guess, you know, Chris and I talked about this a little bit. We gave you guys a draft of the bylaw, assuming that's gonna be a separate review process to some extent. Probably get legal counsel review. But I just wanted to touch upon it in general terms and hit a few points, and then, just so we have a level of comfort of what is it that we wanna present, and how's that look, and how we present that in the warrant article, potentially. So really what the bylaw does, and so this is kind of the purpose, right, the overarching purpose, is it allows the town, it establishes authority to charge a fee for stormwater. And so that's supported by Mass General Law, Chapter 83. And I just highlighted some of the key components. If you read Mass General Law, Chapter 83, it's very brief. It speaks to sewers, but also mentions storm drains. So this is the enabling legislation, for better or worse, that we have to allow communities to establish this authority locally. It's pretty basic, and we've talked about these things. Fees shall be reasonable and equitable, right? So, and to Patrick's point and others, it's like fees should be have a relationship to your benefit, right? Or use of the system. You're paying for something, you should receive some type of benefit from that. And the rate structure shall be fair. And so a lot of this gets down to fair and equitable rate structure. Doesn't disproportionately burden people. We do provide opportunities for relief. We provide opportunity for credit. That's something that isn't explicitly said in there, but we look at the difference between, there's been multiple cases, case law in Massachusetts and other states on the legality of fees versus taxes, right? Fees have to have certain things in them, like the ability to not use the system. That's a little more challenging with stormwater, but that's how credits help address that component from a legal standpoint. And credits are important, and we talked about that a little bit last night with the Finance Committee. You know, there will be a process to review policies or develop policies around credits. You know, what constitutes a credit, what essentially you're giving money back for a property or a ratepayer who's mitigating your cost for service. So there's certain things that may qualify and may not. And so we can talk about credits at multiple meetings, and I've done that with other communities, but it's not necessary now. So it's something that can be developed as the process is implemented. We could do it as part of the final rate setting process. We could also do it later and say the policy has been developed, we're going to implement that and take effect a year from the first bill. And a lot of communities do that because it helps get the program up and running. You could do credits retroactively if you want. And so there's a process around that. So I just wanted to touch upon that because people have a lot of questions about that. And I hate to say we're going to talk about it later, but the details come later. But it is important. This draft, or the draft we gave that's dated November 30th, was modeled after other Massachusetts communities. I took it from work I had done at Millis, so that Millis has implemented a bylaw. Franklin followed suit, very similar. Belchertown as well. So it's a template. So we did modify it obviously for Westborough. So from a standpoint of does it check all the boxes with the Attorney General's office? It has been reviewed and approved, not yours specifically, but very similar ones. It would have to go through the same process. You know, a local review. Ultimately, if it passes at town meeting, it gets reviewed by the AG's office, et cetera. So, and so just you know, another important aspect, we kind of already talked about this in terms of the accompanying policies. You know, people have questions of the rate setting process and annual review of the budget and, you know, what do we do about data updates? How often are we updating the impervious area data? We're not going to do it every year. You know, that's the nice thing is we don't have to read meters, but you don't have meters to read. You got to establish that data up front. And so there's all these kind of nuances as to how we do things with implementation that'll come at a later date. So we don't need that to be in the bylaw. The bylaw can be really basic, but this bylaw includes several things and sections that we've seen common in other stormwater utility bylaws. So I guess with that, I'll just get into the next slide, which is really just meant to talk about the bylaw.
Can I just ask a question on the policies itself? So the policies you referenced that would have to be developed, who, is that sort of DPW, or is it select board policy, or like big picture, like who owns that responsibility?
So staff would probably work to develop it?
Ultimately, they would come to you. But we would develop them and then bring them to you as appropriate, if that's your...
Yeah, so they wouldn't, I mean, you know how we have a series of policies, but they wouldn't be, would they be select board policies? Or
You would have the approval authority.
approval authority?
Yeah.
Okay,
But
okay.
they will be the stormwater utility policy,
Right.
but we have the we approve those.
Okay.
Similar
okay.
to
Police.
So
when
there's
you
not-
approve fees, they live on that department's
I got it.
website.
Okay, thank you. Yep, okay, thanks.
I think like the police policies
Police,
too.
yeah.
Yep,
That we
yep.
Yep.
Yep, we're
approve,
not gonna
but we
develop
don't
them,
develop
right,
and
understood, yep,
write them and
Got it.
whatever, so.
okay,
Right.
thanks.
Yeah, I think the select board is ultimately the authority.
Yep.
Overall.
Yep.
But yeah, policies, and it sometimes handled differently, but it's usually, it's something that is, you know, internal for the most part, but
Yep.
sometimes it's external on the website, whatever. So I guess this is really, you know, any general feedback on the bylaw itself. My understanding is that that's going to be reviewed further, and what we're hoping is to have some discussion and questions, answer those. Is there something that we need to talk about specifically in the bylaw? You know, we don't need to get into every definition. A lot of that's kind of boilerplate. There was a comment. We did get a comment about maybe a section that speaks to additional, not exemptions, but addressing you know, certain rate payers that, you know, low income.
Like hardship situations.
Yeah,
so forth,
hardship
right.
Low income
situations.
seniors,
So
veterans.
we might need to put a little more language in on that.
And the question
Yeah,
would,
Ian,
would,
if I could.
Yep.
So just one quick, I just went out and just quickly read the general law on this, and one of the things that it talks about is the city or town or district may grant credits against the amount of the quarterly or annually change to those property owners who maintain on-site functioning retention and detention basins or other filtration structures as approved by the stormwater utility. So I think what I'm hearing here is when we go, if we move forward with, if this gets approved at town meeting to do this work, we create the bylaw, and the bylaw will have to call out exemptions and credits and things like that. And part of the consideration I think the board is gonna have to understand is what level of work and what kind of data do we have to better understand, in that example, which businesses or properties in town qualify based on the fact that they have and are maintaining properly functioning retention basins and whatnot, and what work is there for the town to go inspect those to make sure that they are properly functioning, and what cost is associated with that. So I think that's all part of the consideration as we look at what that policy that supports the bylaw would be.
Yeah, no, so you're spot on. I mean, is this working? So the credit policy, there's a lot of work that needs to go into that to understand what's the impact of giving certain credits. So it's hard to develop policies around giving money back for certain activities if you don't understand the implications of it from a financial standpoint, but also realistically, what is it truly doing to benefit, to provide a benefit that would offset your cost. And so one of the big things around credits is if you're going to give somebody credit for something they built, you have to make sure that they maintain it properly. So they have to demonstrate that they've done it correctly, it meets design standards, or whatever standard we establish in the policy, which generally references whatever's current design standard, right? So an older system may be managing stormwater, but it's not managing water quality, for example, or it's not infiltrating to current standards. Well, we're not going to give you full credit for that. Maybe we give you partial credit. But then you also have to maintain it properly so it functions as designed. So there's caveats that come with credits. We don't just give it away for nothing, So, but that's all a lot of policy work that is part of the implementation. It doesn't need to be in the bylaw. We need to say that we will grant credits based upon what we feel is reasonable, and there's a process to establish that. So the bylaw does quite often include exemptions, major exemptions, like we're not charging ourselves for roads because it'd have to come out of the general fund and defeats the purpose of doing this altogether. We're not charging for town property because everybody benefits similar to roads. We don't charge rail right away. We charge a rail facility. So the ballast and the rail, so there's some fundamental sort of exemptions that exist that are very common in other communities. Some communities do charge themselves. We can also amend the bylaw at a later date too. If during the financial analysis with implementation we say, hey, it makes sense that we modify the rate structure slightly, and we want to include these things. An amendment to the bylaw seems appropriate. That's common. So if there's elements in here that we have concerns about, we can address those with the public, and we could also make some modification to the language now or at a later date.
Well, I guess that was my question. Beyond the major structural exemptions, if we're talking about exemptions for elderly or low income or, affordable housing, where ability to pay becomes an issue. The question is, are those built into the bylaw, or does the bylaw grant the select board the authority to define those?
Yeah, right now, as I read
Set the rates.
as I
Right
read-
now, it's in the bylaw.
it's in the bylaw and it doesn't allow for any.
Right, but I'm
I
saying,
read it.
if we were gonna consider that, would those need to be built into the bylaw, and therefore the bylaw would need to be amended on the floor of town meeting every time? Or do other communities have a structure where they say, within, these specific parameters could be changed, by the select board, maybe even with a public hearing as a mechanism?
Can I just verify what you just said, Alan? And you're saying that the bylaw contains the specific rate data and exemptions, or is the bylaw in fact just a generality giving the authority to the board to set rates and exemptions in the future?
That's
The
what I'm
latter.
asking.
I think it's the latter.
Okay, that's what I thought as well.
Structured that way.
But right now, so section 8 in the draft bylaw talks about the exemptions, and I think what was brought up is undevelopable. The exemptions that are in there, because I read it specifically, don't allow for any exceptions based on age, tax status, economic status, race, religion, or other conditions. So basically, we don't allow for exemption. The way it's written right now, there are no exemptions with the exception of the following, which you brought up, which was basically undevelopable land, railroad rights of way, and public streets, and town-owned properties. So I think, back to the question, I think if we wanted the ability to do that, we would give the ability of the select board or somebody within the bylaw. We wouldn't say what all the exemptions are
Right, that's
right
what
now
I
in the
was,
bylaw if we wanted to do that.
that's what I was clarifying, that
Yeah.
I would expect we'd grant authority in a process
Yep.
rather than having to amend the bylaw anytime we wanted to consider a change.
Otherwise, there's a lot of work that gotta be done before town meeting.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense, thank you.
Yeah, we could modify it to say, additional exemptions may be granted as determined by the board through policies established thereafter. Something, to that
Yeah.
effect. I'm not a lawyer, but, but I'm sure we could craft some language to allow that without having to get into all the nitty-gritty of how we want to treat certain properties differently. But the point is we have to in the bylaw establish that there's a rational basis for why we're charging a fee, and we can't just arbitrarily exempt people. So we want to follow other guidelines for how other utilities do it. We can do those things even if it's not established in Mass General Law. There's other precedents that are set, and this really is where legal counsel is important to weigh in on these things. But to Patrick's point and your point, Alan, like all those fine details we don't need to have now in the bylaw, but we want to have the ability to do that without having to amend it multiple times. Right.
No, understood. I guess I would expect it on the floor of town meeting, a discussion of exemptions. So if it's possible to amend the bylaw language to indicate that those can be created, as opposed to having to wait for a subsequent town meeting to change the bylaw to allow them to be created.
Yeah.
Would be beneficial.
Some committees also choose, if it becomes a bit of a concern from a legal standpoint, where we think that it's, someone might challenge, like, why are you exempting that property? I don't think that's fair. One way committees have gotten around it is the utility establishes kind of an account, right? Or a program that then allows people to apply for different types of credits. But again, it can't be arbitrary, but at the same time, it basically gives the town the ability to help mitigate some people that come with a circumstance or something that may not exactly fit the framework that you've established,
But again, that could
And
be a
some-
future,
I'm sorry?
that could be a future element of the policy
Right.
that could be developed, right?
So I think what the takeaway for us, and I think we knew this coming in, but it's good to hear it discussed here, is that ultimately in the bylaw, what would be ideal, assuming it passes all the legal tests and everything else, is that it addresses exemptions and it gives the ability for the select board to have the flexibility to, through a policy, implement something at a later date.
And if not legally, then I think to what was just discussed, what would be the other mechanisms available if it's outside of the bylaw?
Yeah.
But I think if we have it in the bylaw, that will be, I do think, as folks said, that would be a question that comes up. But I do also understand, how do you make that fair and equitable?
Right. You don't want to leave it so open-ended that anybody can come before you and say, I just don't want to pay this.
Right.
Like,
Why do we have it?
yeah, I like drinking Starbucks and I can't afford this
Yeah.
bill.
Just for clarification, and switching up here a little bit, I think this falls under kind of the policy itself for like rate setting, but, so things like that it's the cycle of rate setting, whether it's annual, biannual, that would be in the policy, or would that be in the bylaw? It's a question. And then is, a requirement for a public hearing as part of our rate setting? Again, would that be part of the policy of the bylaw?
Are you suggesting we need a public hearing for rate setting? Because we don't do that for anything else, and so I just want to be clear if that's
I
a
don't know what
suggestion or.
the practice has been so far in other communities, so I'm just asking.
Yeah, it's typically what you do for other utilities, that's
Okay.
common practice. And this is where the bylaw can contain as much or as little, there's certain things it needs to
Sure,
minimally contain.
understood.
And there's more it can contain, based upon the town's level of comfort. You know, we feel that that's appropriate, so we're gonna keep it in there. Or we need to leave it open for other opportunities in the future without having to do amendments.
So,
It's kind of a way of tabling things to say, well, okay, we're going to work out the details of that
Yep.
item and establish a policy to address that. We just don't have all the answers right now.
sure, no,
Yeah.
I guess I would, I would think minimally we'd want the bylaw to speak to the cycle of rate setting. So it's an annual process or it's a biannual process. I would think that we would want that to be in the bylaw.
For reviewing rates.
Yes.
Yes, yeah,
Reviewing and setting. Right,
yes. Which we do for other,
right,
The
it
other
just doesn't
utilities,
say
yeah.
that. It doesn't say
No,
what this, that's all.
that's a
That's all,
reasonable
yeah.
change.
And
yeah.
as for the public hearing, I don't know that it's not required for any others, so I guess we wouldn't have that. But
I would think
the
that.
policy might speak to how, well, I guess, never mind, forget that part.
Yeah, I mean, it gets into the details of, Chris has 6 weeks to develop it and to submit it,
Yeah.
and, you know, like it's, there's kind of fine details that we
Yep.
don't need to worry about right yet,
Yep.
but.
I'll jump to the next one.
Yeah.
Just finish up.
So do you want to just talk about the last slide, public engagement a
Yep.
little bit? Kind of wrap things up and then leave it to you guys for further discussion and next steps with any type of action. So we kind of talked loosely about this last meeting. And we thought about it a little bit more. You know, we haven't flushed this out. It's kind of like, well, if you guys give us the green light, we'll continue, right? And develop this information in advance of town meeting, and this feedback's part of that process. So, you know, we say media campaign, so this is kind of based upon what we feel is the best way to message to the public in terms of the avenues, and then the content is something that we have developed. You know, a kind of a go-by fact sheet that we can tweak. Probably a list of kind of Q&A type information could be provided on the website. It could be posting. So we're looking to develop some material. There's a lot of information that's available, just general information about stormwater utilities that can be provided to the public as well. Obviously advertising for upcoming in-person meetings. And so there's really kind of two things, the campaign and then the in-person meetings. We don't have a ton of time in advance of town meeting, but we're expecting that there's probably a day and evening meeting just to accommodate people's schedules. I'm always thrilled if people show up and have questions and are engaged. Not everybody takes an interest in my work, so I'm okay with that, but we want to provide opportunity for people to do that. And so what that in-person meeting would be is you know, a brief presentation that's a bit more tailored to some of the public comments or questions that may come up, kind of history of how we got to where we are, and then focus on what is it that is before you at town meeting. Have discussion, and so really I think reviewing the warrant articles, so you know, the timing of this is hopefully we have those somewhat ready, or we can at least speak to them, similar to at least how we are tonight.
Yep.
And so that's kind of the high-level approach to the engagement. Certainly, any other comments or other things come up, we can, as we advance, we can provide more detail and a more detailed summary of that and just exchange that information. But what was anything you want to add to that?
I just have one comment. It's not really about the strategy. It's more about just practicality. So everything we do, we're paying him to do. And so there's 1,000 things we could do to engage the public and put out information, and we'll attempt to do what we can to educate people. But before you start blasting out all these things that we should be doing,
He knows us.
most of what we need to do requires some expertise to be standing there with us to talk some of the specific details, and so this is within what we can basically pay for right now. Additional stuff would be additional, like we'd have to figure out how to do that, just to give you some like range fan there.
Okay.
Yeah, well, at the same time, we also don't want to sell ourselves short and cut corners. You know, we don't have that much time to do a whole lot more. But if you say we need to have 6 meetings with the public, and we need to engage, you know, the business community at one meeting, and that all needs to be advertised and coordinated. It's part of this is we don't have time, but also, you know, what are we going to get out of that? So we have to think strategically about what's the best use of the time, what's going to really focus the message, what's going to be most effective. And so this is what we feel is kind of a reasonable approach. It's not a crazy robust campaign, because at some point, you know, you don't get any more attention, even if you use a larger hammer to get the message across. You know, and then obviously at town meeting, there's you know, either a presentation or we speak to it at town meeting as well.
Yep.
You know,
Well, I
so-
think that's a good point. No matter if we have 2 meetings suggested here, we have 10 meetings, we're gonna have the discussion at town meeting. We all know that, because some people, we can't force people to go to these meetings. We can provide that opportunity. You know, whether 2's the right one, whether it's 3, I mean, I don't know. I think this seems, to me, what's proposed here seems fair, knowing the fact that, you know, we're gonna get the questions at town meeting. It's absolutely,
Right.
there's no way around that.
And the people that are active, that are paying attention, they're gonna come with questions. There may be a couple business owners, or you know, there's the daytime. There may be some you know, elderly population that comes in that says, you know, listen, we're concerned about affordability, and so we definitely, there's opportunity during this process to address specific concerns, and we want to make sure we're responsive to that. And you know, we can support the town, but I mean, a lot of them are going to be basic questions that the town staff can answer, and then making sure we have a forum to respond to them, or at least, you know, address those along the way. So we don't just put the message out there and just kind of let it sit.
Yep.
You know? We're active in that engagement process,
I thi-
and that's something that staff can generally handle. You know.
So I think in this case, given the timelines, simpler is probably better. So if there are fact sheets, you know, kind of Q&A, questions you see all the time, given your line of work, those that you guys have already kicked around, what you're hearing from Finance Committee, what you're hearing from us. I think an updated fact sheet on the website, one location, not a whole other location, I think is probably best. I think simple is easy. And I'll just put out there, Chris, I think you've been a guest on kind of Frank and Mary in the past of the TV show. If we want to do something through Westborough TV to talk about, to then kind of upload to the website, you know, it's a local TV show from our friends here in Westborough.
Okay.
And so, you know, happy to do that as kind of a more casual setting than in a meeting, so people could kind of watch that. So it's my free time. It's probably not yours, so I'll let you guys think about that, but you can just let me know.
Yeah, and I think back to that is a great idea. It's been used effectively for other things. I think these daytime and evening meetings, if we can work with Westborough TV as well to tape those so people can watch them if they can't make those meetings, and we can encourage and send stuff through social media so people can view those at, you know, their computer, TV, whatever smart device they have, I think is great. I would say leveraging our EDC, you mentioned businesses, of getting information out to businesses, both the fact sheets as well as the advertisement of the meetings might be a way to do that with their contacts throughout our business community. Part of me was saying, hey, do we have a separate meeting for them? But I'm, again, looking at timing and all that stuff. I think it's just more just getting the information. They're not going to look at the town's website like residents do. They're probably not looking at social media about Westborough. Some may, some might not. So just utilizing what we have in those forums might be good as well.
Yeah, and typically there's some behind the scenes work. You know, there's certain people that may, you know, send, you know, messages or give you guys a call. You know, relying upon Chris and DPW and us to help field those questions if you can already, but there's also that kind of behind the scenes, are there concerns that we think we need to address? So there may be something that comes up in this that we need to be a little more pointed on, and get the message out and say, okay, this came up and we want to make sure we addressed it specifically. It wasn't in our Q&A, or we expanded the Q&A, or, so
Yep.
there is some stuff that we'll have to try to address along the way.
Yep, I think that makes sense. I think, I don't want to cut this short, but also knowing the meeting is what we're looking for here. I think from a board perspective, I believe what, Chris, you're looking for here is kind of, and it goes back to political support, is our support to kind of move this forward, continue to move this forward in this process of the warrant articles. We will be reviewing the warrant, closing the warrant as things move forward. This will probably be talked about as well at the budget summit that we have coming up later this month. So I guess, and we'll have those further opportunities, but for, I guess from a board's perspective, similar to that last meeting, what we're trying to get to is, do we have board support to continue the process moving forward? I think comments on bylaws, you've heard some here, we as a board can communicate probably through Christie directly with any other comments we have. So I guess I just want to get, again, not shutting off questions too much, but also knowing that I don't want to keep this meeting going that long, but so definitely let me go with that, but I also just want to get a sense of the board on moving this forward and the steps as proposed on the bylaws, on the warrant articles, as well as then the engagement approach.
So I am supportive of moving forward. This makes sense. I like the approach. I think, so absolutely, I would be interested, and I certainly can go back and watch the Finance Committee meeting, but if there are any highlights or takeaways from that meeting when you presented that we haven't identified here, after the board's had a chance to comment to Ian's question, I would just be interested. You don't have to go into detail what the response was, but just the highlight of, kind of, these were the areas where there was, longer discussion. That would be helpful.
Do you want to hit that?
I can answer it really quickly. In general, the reception from the AFC was very positive. They actually took a vote of support, and I forget how many people are on the AFC, but it was the one nay, and then everybody else was for. So whatever that
There's 9
comes out to.
total, but I don't know if there's 9 on there right now, what the numbers are.
And so the reservation from the nay was just uncertain as to why we needed to do something separate than the general budget.
Okay.
And then there was also some discussion about the impact, that once we figure out the rates, the impact on the commercial properties, especially the larger ones in town that have significant impervious area, that are going to have a high bill or a higher bill relative to everybody else. And so, so there was discussion there, which is all acknowledged, and that's all stuff that's going to be part of the setting the rates process.
Thank you.
Alan?
I'm definitely supportive.
I'm very supportive of this, and I think I'm happy to hear it here, because I think the political will and our leadership on this of moving it forward. The town's going to vote as the town votes, but I think our support for it.
And while there's still a lot of work to do, I also appreciate that a lot of work has been done and a lot of thought has gone into this, so thank you.
Yeah. Patrick? Comments?
Yeah, I would just say, in that same vein, I'm fairly supportive of it. I need more information, obviously, but I am very encouraged by the work that's been done so far, and look forward to seeing, this continue forward, and supportive of it moving forward. And again, looking forward to seeing that additional information. So thank you, Chris and team.
Okay. Other questions that folks have, or are you guys through with your comments? or-
We're done, yes.
You're done, okay.
But this is very productive, a lot of feedback, and we took notes, so we'll incorporate all of that and move to the next step.
Sounds great.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Right on time, wow, I thought we'd be ahead, but that's fine.
I know.
Move stuff around. Okay, item 12, amending job descriptions for the town planner and assistant town accountant. Kim, are you taking us through this, or Christie?
I'm gonna speak to the town planner, and then
Okay.
Kim can do the assistant town accountant. So, as we mentioned before, the current town planner will be retiring at the end of March. So as we always do, we're reviewing the job descriptions. That's also why we're reviewing the assistant town accountant job description. So the town planner job description was updated with a review of the town planner job descriptions in other communities. So we did look at those job descriptions in other communities and integrate some of that language and responsibilities into the town planner job description. So you'll note the addition of sustainability, mention of the climate action plan, and are some examples of changes. The planning board, so we did an initial development of this in our department. We reviewed it with the chair and vice chair of the planning board as well as the town planner, and then we brought it to the planning board on January 3rd. This is obviously a position that reports to the planning board. So I did give you an updated job description since your packet came out with some small tweaks that were offered by a planning board member. But I would recommend that the board approve the job description as presented, given the planning board's support of it.
I'm assuming it was unanimous support of this?
Yes.
Okay,
There was one member
Yeah.
absent.
okay. Patrick, and then Shelby?
Yeah, yeah, I just had one change that I would like to see. I would love to be able to approve this as is, but, and I'm very happy to see the Sustainable Westborough pieces in the job description. There is one line item towards the bottom of the second page, which discusses, it provides oversight, works with the Sustainable Westborough Committee as appropriate to incorporate objectives of the Climate Action Plan into zoning bylaws and land use. I think I'd like to be able to see that be a little bit more prescriptive, and I wrote this statement, or this to replace it. Responsible for incorporating sustainable objectives of the CAP into zoning bylaws and land use, providing regular updates to such Sustainable Westborough.
I think that is substantive, and I think that should go back to the planning board if you're gonna make that change, because the planning board, or the town planner does not specifically report to Sustainable Westborough, nor does it staff that committee. So I do think, and we did go back and forth about how this would be worded. So if you're gonna make that type of change, I think that that's substantive.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a recommendation, we can act on that. Other comments, or?
Christie, what's in our packet, I guess, I'm not clear, what was you said that there were updates since our packet, maybe
I did email it.
Okay.
3:40.
Okay.
No, not this afternoon.
Oh, sorry, no, earlier.
I saved it at 3:40.
Okay.
Okay,
I
I've
know
got it.
Steele had included
No,
it.
I've got it right here.
It was just a couple changes, really just clarifying, there was a, I'm just trying to pull it up.
This is Rev,
Sorry.
it's okay.
There was a, reference to the certification being preferred, there,
In terms of
in
qualifications?
terms of qualifications.
And that was not incorporated?
Not previously. So what we did was we updated the third paragraph. It read, provides professional advice to the planning board, select board, and other relevant agencies on land use. We added housing, commercial, economic development, everything that's in the summary above.
Okay.
Under certificates, licenses, and registrations, we just added the AICP certification, which is the planning certification, and then under other qualifications, we were more clear about the meetings being at night and possibly on the weekends.
I just caught, on, I think it's page 3, where it says represents planning department on several committees. Isn't it Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission?
Oh, yeah.
That's not
Yeah,
substantive.
we can add that.
Yeah,
No, I don't
okay.
think that's
Yeah.
substantive.
Okay, thanks for pointing out those other changes. I did
Yep.
not see that.
Alan, anything?
I'm fine with this as presented, and I would agree with Christie, that I think that the language, that Patrick referenced, is materially different, and I'm comfortable with the language that's here, in the version we saw.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the language as presented, in part because the actual authority to, it's the planning board who votes on zoning changes that would then come to town meeting. So the town planner is working in a support position.
Yeah, let's be clear, though. I'm not asking for them to, I'm not stating that Sustainable Westborough is the authority over the town planner. All I'm suggesting in the language that I provided is that we ensure that the town planner provides regular updates on the sustainable activities of improving the zoning bylaws and whatnot, land use rules, et cetera, to Sustainable Westborough as per the CAP as outlined.
Yeah, but that's, the town planner is a staff position to the planning board. That would be the planning board's responsibility. Because
So
they
you're
control
saying
it.
that, you're saying that the planning board would come to Sustainable Westborough and present the updates?
Or ask the planning.
Or ask the town planner to do it. I think the planning.
That's what I'm
board-
asking. That's what I'm
But- no,
saying in
but I
my
think that-
statement is
Let me finish.
that I'm saying that the,
Hold
that
on,
the-
Patrick. Let
Okay.
Alan finish.
I'm saying the way this is written, it gives the planning board the discretion on how to direct the activities of the town planner.
absolutely.
And so the planning board can decide whether they want to, how they want to coordinate with Sustainable Westborough and what role the town planner has in that coordination. Whereas your prospective wording would require that the town planner operate in a certain way.
Right, we want to make sure that the town planner does come regularly.
No.
When there are, I'll say, significant updates to zoning or perhaps questions related to sustainability, that is, in fact, at the appropriate times, maybe once a year, maybe once every other year. It could be once a quarter, whenever there's zoning changes that are related to sustainable topics in the CAP, we want to make sure that, that the Sustainable Westborough is being informed and engaged in that process and in that discussion for those updates.
So,
So Go
I
ahead.
think the language that's here works with the Sustainable Westborough Committee as appropriate. To me, is exactly what you're asking. It may not be as strong a language that you want, Patrick, but I think it's pretty intuitive that that's what it implies. And to Alan's point, I don't think it would be the planning board's responsibility to set the expectation for their report, that being the town planner, to say the expectation in order to meet this requirement is that, anything that, whatever the criteria are that they want to establish for those reporting requirements. I don't think that the language that you're proposing makes it that much stronger, to be honest with you. I think it still has to be fleshed out by the planning board.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, and just going back, I mean, yes, we approve job descriptions, the fact that this has been worked on by the planning board, approved by the planning board. I do agree that a change like that would have to go back to them. I think this covers it. So personally, appreciate the comments, Patrick, but I'm not supportive of recommending that change. I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that, I've heard 3 folks say supportive of what's currently in there, so I'm not sure that we need to take a vote on that. I'll just say that we'll look to vote on the job description, and if you're not comfortable, Patrick, with that, again, you can vote against
No,
that.
I was just looking for some, I'll say, more black and white language. The term "as appropriate" is pretty broad, and I just wanted to make it a little bit more clear that there's an expectation and a need, to be honest, to have, I'll say, more direct conversations with Sustainable Westborough, because I think, as we know, the master plan, the CAP, et cetera, all outline many things that need to be accomplished in regards to zoning. and many of them relate to sustainability and the topics that Sustainable Westborough is passionate about. So I appreciate all three of your comments. It doesn't sound like you're buying into that. So if you think that that's already clear in the language, that's fine. Then our expectation is the same, and you know, we'll address in the future if there's a need. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. Any other comments then?
Just the town seal on this, and the final clean version is still the old one.
All of them, yeah. All of the job descriptions need the new town seal.
Right, but this is an opportunity, right, to change it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay. That's all.
Okay, anything further?
It was on the other one, that's the
We'll
only
change
reason.
it. I mean, we would change it without bringing them to the board.
No, of
for-
course, yeah,
okay.
yeah, no, yeah.
Like other things have already been done?
Yeah, no, I understand. I just was, the other one has it, this one didn't, that's all.
Oh, I see.
That's all.
I see what you're saying.
I'm gonna take these separately just because of the discussion we had on this. Let's, before we go to assistant town accountant, I'd look for a motion to approve the amended job description, which is basically the one that was sent to us for the position of town planner. So is there a motion?
So I move to approve the town planner job description as presented in the version sent to us via email at 2:55 on January 9th.
Second?
Okay, any further discussion or comments? Okay, all those in favor, roll call vote. Patrick?
Welch, yes.
Edinburgh, yes?
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes.
Okay, 4-0, 4 being present. Okay, assistant town accountant. Kim?
Okay. The updates are primarily really intended to, under the essential duties and responsibilities, provide some more specificity and really identify some of the discrete, skilled accounting and administrative work that this position performs. So the tasks that are on here, there's more detail. These are things that the position currently performs. We just wanted it captured on paper.
Okay. Questions board members have on this?
No.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move to approve the amended job description for the position of assistant town accountant as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Roll call vote. Patrick?
Welch, yes.
Edinburgh, yes?
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes.
Okay,
Thank
4-0, 4 being present. Thank you. Okay, moving forward, downtown parking process discussion. This is a result of Patrick, Board Member Welch's, asking for this agenda item to be discussed on parking time limits in the downtown area. As was noted in our package in the summary, to make any changes there, that process required the board to hold a hearing on proposed rule changes to the traffic rules and regulations, et cetera. Select member Edinburgh had provided some recommendations to town manager for consideration. To her had been included in our packet at this point. With that, I think I'll turn to Christie for further discussion because I don't want to speak for you any further.
So I think, what Patrick had asked for at the last meeting was just to understand sort of how you might move forward in this process, or at least that's how I understood his comments. So as you mentioned, you would have to hold a public hearing, which has requirements for advertising as well, to actually consider making changes to the traffic rules and regulations, which is what you would be doing when you change the parking term limits in the downtown. In talking to some other staff members, one of the things that we really want the board to take into consideration as we move forward is that this really is a comprehensive project. I know that it was sort of triggered by some enforcement of parking in the downtown. In looking back, and this is not in your packet, but in looking back at how many, they call them overtime parking tickets, were were issued in 2021. There were 5 of them. Understanding that obviously COVID was still, going on at that time. In 2022, there were 23 of them. So it's not as maybe as big of a concern as was sort of triggered by the initial conversation. I do think that if the board wants to take this on, it really is a goal. And it would include review of the CMRPC study, looking at the current needs and uses of the downtown. It's a little bit different now when we have the Coop and we have Cha Cha and Beans as an example that weren't there when CMRPC did their study. Plus we had COVID. The support of future uses as defined by the master plan, I think, is really important to take into consideration. I know Sustainable Westborough has had conversations about where we might put EV charging stations as an example, which obviously that would speak to how long you would allow someone to park there. And just recently, there's been a request of the Disability Committee to look at handicap parking spaces in the downtown. So that would also, I think, play into this discussion. Probably most immediately is the fact that the 2021 master plan, the economic development subcommittee talked about the need for the review of the CMRPC plan and to identify parking activity issues and plans for future needs. So I think the most initial first step is to talk to the implementation committee, of which I'm a member, as well as Patrick. We're sort of working on our priority lists right now, so to understand where this falls on the priority list. And then we can report back to you. And if the board, finds that it's a higher priority than maybe the implementation committee, I think that we should really, again, look at that as being a goal. I would advise that you would just ask me to put together a group. Likely there would be, staff members from police, EDC, planning, fire, to really start to look at some of this and then bring back a recommendation at some point.
Okay, thank you for that. Open it up for questions or comments. Patrick, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so thank you, Christy, and I agree with what you're saying. I guess my only question or I guess concern is just timing, right? So as you mentioned, there's several new businesses, a lot of new restaurants in the downtown area, which is fantastic. The data that you provided is great to understand. My concern is we've got a number of businesses now that may require a clientele who needs to park in that general rotary area longer than an hour. And as a person driving through the town, I want to park and go to one of those locations. I see a 60-minute parking. I may decide to go elsewhere just because I have to park 3 blocks away. And so I think there's maybe a little bit more urgent of a need to address at least the initial or the immediate rotary area. But I completely support the idea that this is something that should be the broader conversation through master implementation and the understanding. I think as the board is aware or seen, there's been a significant uptake in, I'll say, online conversations in regards to some incidents that have recently happened down around the Rotary, and perhaps additional signage is needed or other mechanisms to help make it a more safe environment. And that's all part of what I think should be part of that broader conversation. But I do think to solve the problem of the immediate need, I think of alleviating that short-term parking so that businesses as well as residents can feel a little bit more flexibility in their ability to be down in the downtown area and provide, get to where they need to be and not be rushed to do the business that they need to do.
I would just add that that we don't have a individual parking enforcement officer, and that a lot of the tickets that are written are complaint driven. So businesses have called because people are parking too long in front of their businesses. So I know that there's been a couple. I know that I think some of you have heard some concerns based on that Facebook post about enforcement, but our office at least hasn't received any concerns from businesses. It'd be interesting to talk to the EDC coordinator and see what he's hearing.
Yeah, I would definitely like to understand the business perspective. I would also, I know my understanding is we no longer have crossing guards as an example in the downtown area. So there's, just that broader conversation around public safety, traffic safety in that downtown area. And I think that is a broader topic than what I was kind of looking to tackle here. So, but I'm curious to hear what the rest of the board thinks on this.
I like the way forward Christie has presented because it takes a comprehensive approach. I would just add that there was also a safety study done several years ago. I know some of the signage and the painted lane markings are a result of that. But that study also, for example, recommended removing certain parking spots to make it safer for cars and pedestrians. And so that sort of conflicts with getting as much parking as possible. So that would I would suggest that be in the mix as well. Some additional information, whether or not we say, let's, go forward and just change parking durations and nothing else while the more strategic work is going done. I think that's a possibility, but getting before we effort that and do things twice or in two stages, that we get a little bit more data about the urgency.
Okay, thank you. Shelby, anything?
Yeah, so as much as I'd love sort of a quick solution fix, I don't, for two reasons, I don't think that that's the best approach, to be honest. I mean, living near the downtown and going through it multiple times a day, I have to say that I always find I see parking spots. I'm not necessarily using them. I always see parking spots within a very reasonable, able person, pedestrian distance to the various businesses we've talked about and those that we haven't mentioned, really surrounding kind of the whole Rotary and extending beyond. So I'm fully supportive of a thorough look at, casting a pretty wide net as to what we define downtown to do a comprehensive look. I always worry about the word study because I immediately go, God, how much is this going to cost us? And maybe it will, but I hope that we have a lot of tools, as Christie's already presented in our packet, that would maybe require us, it would certainly be staff time and there's a cost to that. But, we don't have, I was told, I don't recall that we used to have a handicap parking spot right out in front of Town Hall, and we no longer have that. So that's more of a concern to me, that we don't have one handicap spot, to my knowledge, on-street parking in the downtown area for our municipal buildings, let alone businesses. So, and then, some other things, certainly the, business accessibility, I get it. But Alan, you sort of touched on this, and I had mentioned this. This ties into the many library discussions this board and the community has had around the library and accessibility for its services. But we have a general wayfinding issue for parking spots. And, maybe there's grant money through EDC, and I think, there is, I know we did get an earmark. I don't know if that really is around
hasn't gone through
parking
yet,
or
but
whatever, but I think
Sure.
that there's some, we've talked, I think we're working the policy for outdoor dining, right, on,
Yep.
is not final, so we got a lot of all these pieces that I think have to come together. My concern with the approach of, to the Master Plan Implementation Committee, which I do think is the right spot, is what if they go, not as much of a priority, and then we say, no, really high priority, but then we don't kind of have that really important body on board. So I think I'd be very supportive of carrying a very strong message back to that committee of this board feels, I think this is a really big priority, because it touches housing, it touches economic development, et cetera, et cetera. And so I don't have to kind of drone on. The town hall, the Great Hall, we haven't really even started to see full use of that. And who knows what that parking implication is. So I think it's really important, but as much as I'd love to put up some signs that say, hey, it's 1 hour and enforce it or whatever, I just don't think that that's the solution. And if residents are finding, or if businesses are finding it's a problem, call the police department. I presume that that's the path forward and, report it and, that's data and, elements that can be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Shelby. You hit a number of things that I wanted, so thank you for bringing this up. I won't repeat them. I think, and Patrick, thank you for you bringing it up. What I did really like, Shelby, what you said is I think from a board's perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've kind of heard it here, that for the recommendation that Christy had for Christy and Patrick to take this back to master plan implementation, I think bringing it back, that this is very important to us to move forward with, is good, because I think I do think it is important. I think I've heard that from others. To add to your piece, Shelby, at the end there, I think, and bringing in Patrick's piece, I think if there are businesses that are concerned because feel like they're losing business, or hearing that they're losing business because patrons aren't stopping because of the time, please communicate that as well. I'll personally say I have not heard anything. To me personally, I think others have heard stuff. I have not heard a single complaint from a resident or a downtown business about concerns about downtown parking. So this is a little bit new to me, but it's clear that others have heard it. So I take that. And that's where I come out saying I think this is an important thing for us to tackle quickly. I do agree with the comprehensive approach to it, encompassing what all of you have said of those considerations. So I guess my take is I'm supportive as well as what Christy recommended for her and Patrick to take back, with that caveat that says this is of high importance from the select board's thing to prioritize it.
Yeah, and I guess I don't want to assume, so if the master plan implementation committee says it's not the prioritization,
back
you'll
to us.
bring that back, and then we'll figure out
Yeah.
next steps.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we're meeting every other week, the master plan implementation, so we should be able to report something back for your next meeting.
Yeah, or
Yes.
if not, sometime soon.
Yeah, I think that's great. Let us know what we hear, and then we
Yep.
tackle it as we deem appropriate from the results we get there.
Sounds
Patrick,
good.
is that good, Patrick, or anything?
No, that sounds good. Thank you for working through that.
No, thank you for bringing it
Yeah,
forward
absolutely. It's
and
good.
talking about it. Okay, next on our agenda is a recommendation from the Library Board of Trustees to terminate parking license with Congregational Church, and I see the chair and the library director here, so. Good
Hi.
evening, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Mary Johnson, is this on? Sorry. 5
Yeah.
Sand Pond Road, Chair of the Library Board of Trustees. And so, we sent a letter to you as making a recommendation that the trustees would be in support of you terminating the contract or agreement with the Congregational Church. And so I just wanted to let you know, how that conversation kind of came about, doing our due diligence after the town meeting votes and all the things and conversations that we've learned. We're kind of processing all the questions, comments, and concerns we heard during that process. And one of the more frequent conversations we had was with the Congregational Church, and that they expressed their concern repeatedly over the library's usage of their aging parking lot and the impact that has on them, as well as their concern about should somebody, a staff or patron, fall on their lot, their concern that they'd be liable for it as well. And so we were having that conversation about if that contract were to be terminated, how that would impact the library. And it came up that there's been times before in which the library staff have not used that parking lot, and it's worked out okay. Being that we're kind of like a third party in this agreement, we voted to discuss how we felt about it if that agreement wasn't in place, and the trustees were in favor of terminating it, so we made that recommendation to you that should you feel as if you wanted to terminate that the trustees would be in support of that. So I feel like we're kind of like a third party in this, but it's not our agreement, so we put that forward to you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Open up to the board for questions or comments. Go ahead,
Couple
Alex.
questions. So, throughout the discussion of the library renovation project, my understanding is that concerns from the church had to do with setting aside spaces all the time for the construction equipment and, construction traffic and the damage, that a lot of their concerns about the use of the lot were related to that specific project. So were these other concerns there before the library project discussion came to a head, or pre-COVID, if you will?
So I can't say that we've had conversations with them outside of the project, but the conversations that we had with them were current usage and future. So we just wanted to make sure that they're already concerned that they have an aging parking lot, and they seem to think that our usage is the primary usage of their lot as opposed to their day-to-day outside of Sunday.
Okay.
Having said that, though, I will say that it was interesting to me to find out from patrons that as our public forums were happening, we were talking about parking at the church, a large number of patrons weren't aware that that was available for parking as well. So it seems to be more that potentially staff using it more than patrons.
Great, thanks. Other questions or comments?
Yeah, just a question. What is the annual cost to the town for the snow maintenance there? Or does that come out of the library budget, or is that town?
That is paid for out of the DPW budget, not out of the library.
Okay. And so it's a parking lot, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Chris,
Okay.
Chris said it's minimal.
Chris said it's minimal.
Minimal.
It's minimal.
Yep, okay.
My comments are just with the recommendation here. I looked through the contract. That what you're recommending is 30 days, which is the agreement that either party can terminate with a 30-day notice. I think the recommendation to us and the town manager would be to make it a little more time, just because we're in the heart of the winter season. So I think your recommendation was to go through April 1st.
Right, so I know we had talked about, all of this is in the spirit of being good neighbors, and so we would provide the notice and be willing to continue it through March
Basically
if needed. Yep.
Yeah, and my take is, this is used for the library. Library trustees took that vote to us while we're the licensing authority. I think that's the primary usage. Mary, as you just said, I think it sounds like it may be more staff than patrons, and patrons not knowing about it. So in the heart of being good neighbors, I think makes sense, and also listening to others. I don't have a reason not to listen to what the Board of Trustees has requested. If you think that makes sense. Personally, for me, I would be supportive. I do like the idea of extending them through the winter season, just because we're in the midst of it, and trying to get them to have to find contractors at this point may be difficult. So but that's my comments. Other comments?
Finding
questions?
snow might be difficult.
That'd be fine with me too. Well, fine with Chris's team as well. Yeah, save some money in the budget.
Would you like a motion?
Sure.
So I move to terminate the parking license agreement between the town of Westborough and the Congregational Church, and to make the termination effective no later than April 1, 2023.
Second?
Okay, any further comments or questions? Okay, if not, roll call vote. Patrick?
Welch, yes.
Allen?
Edinburgh, yes?
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes.
So that's 4-0 for being present. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Christie, annual town meeting warrant. I know you provided the latest draft to us earlier, but take it away.
So I just wanted to walk through it very quickly, understanding that at the January 24th meeting, we'll have the budget hearing, and then at January 26th, you'll hear from the major departments, so DPW, police, fire, and school. But we have also invited information technology, because there's a lot in that budget based on the assessments that we've recently done, and then also community development, because there's some additions there. So a lot of this you're going to hear about in the next couple weeks. The first and second articles are typical election in the town reports. We have a prior year bill for Article 3 in the Recreation Department. Article 4, we have the 2024 operating budget, which we'll talk more about next meeting. Article 5 is funding of the stabilization reserve account, which we've brought up a few times, and we'll talk more with the finance team about that at our next meeting, so we'll have a number to put in here. But really looking at meeting our comprehensive fiscal management goals by increasing stabilization using and lowering free cash. Article 6, the regular recurring articles. So we have the reserve funds, the restocking of Sandra Pond, the annual cable TV budget, the block party. There's an increase this year of it's gone from $2,500 to $3,500 due to increase in costs. We've added to the regular recurring articles the hazardous waste day. The idea of this is that similar to some of our other articles, we would want to keep the hazardous waste day article at a specific amount, so $25,000, so that when it's being used, if you don't use all of that money, it'll be carried over to the following year, and then we would just bring it up to that $25,000 amount. So this year they're able to have two, because of the last article, they're able to have 2 hazardous waste days. Article 7 is the small business grant program for the go ahead.
Are we asking questions now? I just didn't understand.
You can. I mean, I think this
Quick
is really kind of
questions, yeah.
introducive. But
Just
yeah.
really,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, so the, on the hazardous waste day, this is still, would we see this in the future? I just didn't understand. what you-
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it
Okay.
used to be in the budget. We took it out because of COVID,
Yep.
and then we wanted to bring it back as a separate article for a town meeting, as opposed to putting it in the budget,
Oh, okay.
which is what we did last year. And then the recommendation is to, rather than putting it back in the budget, the funding is the same, it's still a raise and appropriate, but keeping it as a regular recurring
I
article.
understand. Thank
Yep.
you. Okay.
Article 7 is the small business grant program. So as I mentioned, we're not going to be able to move forward. We're not going to continue to use a revolving account mechanism for funding of this program. And so rather there would be an article, and we can talk more about that. I know Fred's going to talk about that at the 26th. Article 8 is the capital improvement plan. The article information hasn't been updated, but all of the articles have related to what's being put forward. So there's vehicles, there's security system upgrades for the fire department. I'm just skipping through some of these. Information technology upgrades, again, related to the outcomes of our assessment. The cruisers for the police department. Number H, or letter H, is the buildings and grounds capital maintenance. So this is an article that would provide some funding to take care of some of the things that we've seen throughout the year. We've had to go back to town meeting or have a reserve fund transfer for. I is to doing improvements for the facilities. So Chris will speak to, and the article information will say specifically what that is. In DPW, there's several vehicles and pieces of equipment, as we typically see. When you get to N, that is an indoor golf simulator. That would be funded out of the country club retained earnings. And then O and P are also out of country club retained earnings related to the golf course equipment. Q, I think this is the first time we've gotten to Q. Just understanding that now we're putting so much more into the capital plan. That's why we're seeing more subsections of this article. The Mill Pond School roof restoration is that article, and then R is the Hastings School roof design, and then S is the Hastings School ADA construction. Article 9 is a placeholder article for the library with the loss of the approvals at town meeting. They're moving forward looking at design for repairs. Article 10 is security cameras that were identified in the police department's accreditation assessments. That one and this Haskell Street tennis basketball court lights the amount is too low to qualify for the capital plan. That's why they're sitting outside the capital plan. So Haskell Street tennis and basketball court lights, that's a conversion to LED lights. Article 12 is likely coming off of the warrant. So we'll talk more about that on the 24th, 26th. Article 13 is a request for funding for our annual certification revaluation as required through the Board of Assessors. Article 14 is a transfer of stabilization mitigation funds to the Affordable Housing Trust. That's the money that came from the initial special permit for Pulte. If we didn't receive, we would get 1.4 million if they didn't create affordable housing within a certain time frame. Article 15 is also a placeholder that's looking at country club renovations. We're reviewing the building assessment tomorrow, and so this will be an agenda item for you on the 24th, just to understand where we're at and what our plan is and how we're going to move forward. Article 16 is to rescind borrowing authorization. So we've been doing that the last few meetings. This is just for the for one article. Article 17 is stormwater system improvements. So we heard a little bit about that tonight. This isn't related to the utility fund, but this is a need. Article 18 is water distribution system improvements. Then 19 is water treatment system improvements. And
7-day meeting
yeah.
coming up.
Article 20 is the water supply infrastructure improvements. 21 sewer system improvements, and then 22 is sewer collection system improvements. So we'll hear all about those from Chris on the 26th. Article 23 is a placeholder. So this is what we just talked about tonight. So this is establishment of the enterprise fund. And then following that is Article 24, which is that funding for implementation. Article 25, they're just finalizing the verbiage for the bylaw, but it's amendments to Article 54, which is the stormwater management and erosion control bylaw. That's separate from the stormwater utility fund, so I know Chris is going to work really hard to keep that clear. And then Article 26 is amendments to the water use restriction bylaw. Article 27 is the Community Preservation Committee bylaw, which you talked about recently at one of your meetings. And then Article 28 is the full replacement of the zoning bylaws. So we've been working with General Code for, I think, 18 to 24 months, having them help us update, reformat, reorganize. So this would be a request to fully replace the zoning bylaw with the new bylaw. That's been a major project, and I think will be really nice. And it will also, if you look at other communities that use General Code, it's really easy to navigate their codes on their websites, which we will have that feature as well.
So that's not a change, it's really like an administrative
Yeah, renumbering.
number, okay, good.
Yeah,
Making it
reformatting.
Ease of use.
Yeah.
Ease of use.
Yeah.
That's great.
Great.
And then Article 29 is an update to the zoning bylaw, which truly transfers review authority of signage from the Historical Commission to the Design Review Board in the downtown historic districts and other districts where there's overlapping review. So,
I just had a quick question back to the Article 11. Just real quickly, it'll be answered now, but with this one's going to replacement of lights for LEDs, so more energy efficient, whether there's any grant opportunities for that. And
yeah, I think we talked about that with the rec director, so we'll be pursuing that. But
okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Any other comments or questions on this? Again, we'll be hearing more detail in our next couple of meetings.
So previously, we had altered funding for OPEB using free cash. Do we need that transfer on the warrant? Or is it-
That actually happened through the motion in the budget article,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
I believe. Yeah.
cool.
But that's still, I believe that's how we did it. So we would do it again how we did it before. The only other article that I'm aware of that I know Melinda had some suggestions around the animal control bylaw. So specifically related to kennels.
And the only other potential one that I'm aware of is
Oh, right.
possibly the Hockomock Reuse Committee may have something to recommend to the board to be on the warrant, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Meeting this week.
Patrick, anything from your side?
I guess, is there anything, and maybe you already mentioned it, is there anything expected or needed for the regional dispatch center?
I don't think at this point. We have a meeting on January 30th to talk to EPA about that site, and I think following that meeting, we'll understand better sort of next steps. But that's a good point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, let's move on to item, thanks for that, Christie. Move on to item 16, request to approve meeting minutes. Start with November 22nd. Is there a motion for their approval?
I move to approve the meeting minutes of November 22nd, 2022 as presented.
Second.
Okay, any comments, questions, corrections on the 22nd? Not, all those in favor? Roll call vote, Patrick?
Welch, yes?
Edinburgh, yes.
Johnson, yes?
Marshall, yes.
Okay, those are approved, 4-0, 4 being present. Sorry, I'm trying to go back and forth between emails. And
November 23rd.
So November 23rd, Select Board meeting minutes.
Move to approve the meeting minutes of November 23rd, 2022 as presented.
Second.
Pretty small minutes
Yep.
there. Any questions, comments, corrections on that one? If not, roll call vote. Patrick?
Welch, yes?
Allen?
Edinburgh, yes.
Johnson, yes?
Marshall, yes.
It's 4-0, 4 being present. And then December 13th, excuse me?
I was going to make the motion.
Go ahead.
I move to approve the meeting minutes of December 13th, 2022.
Second.
Okay, any comments or questions? Sheila, thanks for getting those to us to review ahead of this too, so. Okay, seeing none, roll call vote. Patrick?
Welch, yes?
Edinburgh, yes.
Johnson, yes?
Marshall, yes.
Okay, those are approved, 4-0, 4 being present as well. I think that's it there, so town managers report. Christie?
So as I've mentioned a few times, the budget summit is on January 26th. We'll begin at 8:30, going to approximately 4 o'clock, and that's going to be in the Great Hall, and that's an in-person meeting. For certificates, as an update on certificates of inspection, the Westborough Inn and Mexicali were able to address the deficiencies within their building to be able to obtain their certificate of inspection from the building department. So Westborough Inn was able to collect their 2023 innkeeper lodging house permit on December 30th. And Mexicali was able to retrieve their 2023 liquor license on January 3rd, 2023. Chipotle Mexican Grill has chosen not to renew their Section 12 wine and malt license, meaning that license is now available. Our new conservation director is starting on January 17th. Jennifer Miller is an experienced environmental scientist and program manager with public sector experience at both the municipal and regional levels. She has served as the conservation agent for the town of Seekonk for the past 6 years, where she has administered wetlands permitting, coordinated a large-scale brownfield remediation project, and managed town-owned conservation properties. Prior to her tenure in Seekonk, she held progressively responsible positions with the County of San Diego Department of Parks and Recreation, performing land stewardship and resource management roles. She has a bachelor's degree in biology and environmental studies from Tufts University, so we're really excited to bring her on board. Community development, on December 15th, the EDC staff kicked off the Minority and Women-Owned Business Study with UMass Boston Collins Center. On the 21st, they hosted a ribbon cutting for Cha Cha and Beans, which is the new boba tea shop across the street. On December 23rd, the EDC learned it had won in a joint application with the town of Acton, $40,000 grant through the Regional Economic Development Organization, or REDO, grant program to implement a pop-up activation project in a vacant storefront in each community. So they're going to move forward with that and work with the consultant. And then throughout the month of December, they hosted the Shop Westborough Holiday Passport promotion, which they announced the results on January 6th. The Department of Public Works, they've had replacement of approximately 1 mile of water pipe along Flanders Road and Sampson Drive, which is complete. The DPW recently met with representatives from Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, or the MWRA, which supplies drinking water to many municipalities, including Boston. So the town is now a participant in that study to assess the feasibility of extending to MWRA infrastructure and water delivery to more towns. It's expected to be complete mid-2023 and will help inform future decisions about Westborough's long-term water supply needs. The January edition of the American Public Works Association Reporter magazine featured an article about the Westborough DPW. The article shares lessons learned from the implementation of the town's sector maintenance program, and there's a link in my report that people can click on to read that. The police department will receive a certification accreditation award February 15th, and they're being assessed for their full accreditation in the coming weeks. So that was a goal of Chief Lori's when he got here, and so we're really excited to see that coming to fruition. In the finance department continues to work with Unibank Financial Advisor to process bond anticipation notes, which are coming due at the end of March. The borrowing process takes several months to complete. As you're aware, we've been very successful in taking advantage of the short-term borrowing rates and making additional paydowns whenever possible. The town has not borrowed permanently for general debt since 2018, except for a small refunding in 2020. We've also been aware the town can only short-term borrow for 10 years, which we've talked about previously. Working with our financial advisor, we've concluded it would be prudent to do a small permanent borrow along with the short-term bond anticipation notes, since long and short-term rates are currently similar. So our plan is to continue to borrow short-term for the majority of our debt, but permanently borrow the Hastings pre-K school portion, which is about $11 million. That'll allow us to lock in rates for a portion of the town's debt without a large impact on the tax rate. This is accomplished because a significant portion of the Hastings paydowns and interest is currently covered within the debt budget. And the reason it's being chosen is because it was authorized in 2017, first issued in 2018, and so even though we're not close to the 10-year, it is the oldest. We have been advised that smaller bonds issues are more attractive to lenders than larger ones, which in turn may attract more competition. If we begin strategic permanent borrowings over the next few years, we will not bump up against the 10-year cap. So all of that is to say that we're following our debt strategy. Things are working very well, but understanding that the need to permanently borrow for some projects is coming. We're being strategic about when we're doing those things. And so that will come before you in March, as it typically does. And that's my report.
Great. Issues and correspondence of the Select Board. Patrick, start with you.
I have nothing this week, thank you.
Thank you. Alan.
Nothing this week?
Wow. Shelby,
Wow,
you're not even ready yet, are you?
jeez.
I can stall for a minute, I just say Happy New Year to everyone.
Thanks.
No, I was trying to pull up something. So yeah, just, first of all, I want to acknowledge and thank the school department for putting together a really nice ribbon cutting event for the Fales Elementary School. So I know many members of the board were able to attend, and town staff, including our town manager. I thought it was great. There was I thought a great turnout for Sunday when the Patriots were playing their last hope game for the playoffs, or just before that. So it was great to see folks there, and it is it's a gem
Magnificent.
of an investment in our community. Lots of great comments shared by the chair of the school building committee, Steve Durrett, who had worked. I just want to give a shout out to him in particular for his many, many hours, and Marianne Standard, the principal of Fales, for her work to bring that building online and through the whole process. So I was proud to be a member of the school building committee. There are some closeout items that we're still working on. And the one thing I've learned is that no project is perfect, particularly one of that magnitude and size, but it really is a building that we should be very proud of in its investment in not only the kids of this town, but certainly the families and just the town as a whole. So a really, really nice job. Chrissy, you touched on one of the items that I had just swirling in my mind around the accreditation. So I would assume at some point we'll get kind of an update from the chief on like a little bit more like what was the result of the certification and so on and so forth. Okay,
Yep.
so that would just be an ask that I have. The other question I have, to the board would be the interest in, I think we've touched on this in a couple different areas as we've looked at the Harvey building and we've looked at the the country club, et cetera. And certainly in light of the library project's kind of demise as a major renovation, thinking about kind of, and maybe this is part of the master plan implementation, so I'm not sure where this is going. This is my very long intro to, like, what are the future needs? Like, we've talked about a community center, like really looking at our town assets and what are those needs? And I'm not sure who's sort of, I feel like it's master plan implementation, but maybe it's not. I'm seeing Chrissy say no.
Well, I mean, looking, in terms of responsibility for our assets, that's between really the DPW director and myself. The board gave me a goal in April, which was to provide sort of, I think what you're asking for, which is kind of a schedule of like large capital projects. And so having received a lot more information this year from our departments in the capital plan and creating that long range kind of data narrative that you'll see in your books, we'll use that to create that sort of schedule. We do need the board to weigh in when we're talking about the future use of the Harvey building as an example, because I don't think that we have a clear vision of what that building will be used for. The building assessments were for the country club, the Harvey building, and the community building, I believe.
Right.
So, some of those things, like the country club, we've been talking about the RFP and I think we've had some great energy around the golf club since we've made some of the changes and brought Matt on. So I guess the point is there's a lot of different people kind of looking at that. I think a lot of people are really interested in sort of a schedule, if that's what you're talking about, and that's coming. But I also think in terms of understanding the future use of some of these buildings that maybe we view as underutilized, that's a discussion for this board.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's so I appreciate that kind of clarity of this. I think it's the latter that
Okay.
I'm
Sure.
particularly in as we think about future needs and ideas, particularly coming from the public that are saying we need, and it's
Mhm.
like, what do we really need and where would we go with that? So I welcome that conversation at some future time.
Senior needs assessment is a big part of that too.
Yes,
Yeah.
right, senior needs, thank you.
Great, is that it?
Yep.
I said two quick things. One is, did receive a note in the mailbox from Paul Horgan, asked me to pass thanks on to the board members. Each of you called out personally for just a grand evening on his behalf, so he's very thankful and appreciative of his recognition as Veteran of the Year and our support of that at that meeting. So thanks. Pass along that thanks. The other piece, and it came up as a question earlier, but Christy and I have been working with the town managers and board chairs from the surrounding communities in regards to regional dispatch. So we've had a couple of meetings, and a reminder again, who we're talking with right now is Southborough, Grafton, Westborough, and Hopkinton. And then one of the requests that had come out of those meetings was, as we talk about a potential facility, was a site visit to the building up on the Hockomock Pond. So we actually did that this afternoon. and had invited, again, board chairs, town managers, police chief, fire chief. So we had a good turnout there to look at the property, look at the building, and kind of continue to move forward. And we'll get an update back to the board soon. But things are progressing forward, at least at this point. No decisions as of yet, but I think that we're starting to get some agreement and some looking at potential intermunicipal agreements, which would be important as part if we were to move forward with seeking state funding and grants to do a regional dispatch. That's a key component of it. So, again, more to come, but just kind of an update for folks that we are actively still working on that.
Excellent, thanks for your work.
There is one more thing. Monday evening
Thank you.
is the 5th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Celebration. There'll be a theatrical performance and a musical performance. It's a slightly different style of event than in previous years. It's co-sponsored with the Westborough Interfaith Clergy, Westborough Public Schools, Central Mass Connections and Faith, and Westborough Connects. And so that's Monday, 6:30 p.m. at the high school.
Thanks for that. Okay, I think that's everything there. Motion for executive session.
I move to go into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A. Oh, I'm reading the whole thing right now,
Yep,
right?
all of
Okay,
it,
sorry.
yep, all of this, yep.
Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the state, with the police patrol. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Ferris Development Group LLC versus Town of Westborough, Lax Media LLC, and Lax Media MA LLC. Worcester Superior Court, case number 2285 CV01281. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Town of Westborough versus Westborough SPE LLC, Worcester Land Court, 19 TL 000768. And under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to act under the authority of the Select Board to approve executive session minutes of November 22nd, 2022.
Do you have additional minutes, too, that we wanted to hit there? That we didn't post it?
I didn't publish them there, we can't.
Okay.
But
So we do have them, so they'll be ready for next time. Thank you for that. And I declare that open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the board's bargaining and litigating position. The board will not be reconvening in open session at the conclusion of the executive session. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Patrick?
Welch, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes.
Thank you again to Westborough TV for this evening, and we will now enter into executive session. Thank you.